The November 28, 2017 meeting of the Methacton School District Board of the School Directors is now called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alright. Okay, this is kind of short. Hi, my name is Abigail Drummond, and before I start this short speech, I would like to thank my amazing principal, Dr. Edge, for choosing me to be here tonight. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a brief overview about Eagleville Elementary, our school, and our students, staff, and activities. To start, the students. I was a transfer student from Woodland, and I've worked alongside other students who came from Woodland and Eagleville students. The other kids were quick to make friends with me, or at least get me used to Eagleville. They're very smart and kind, and well, so far I've loved working with them. I still have friends who I knew from Woodland, but I've made lots of new friends this year too. As for our staff, they help the students learn and they devote a lot of time to us. My teacher, Mrs. Holmes, is a very patient teacher, and she makes sure that everyone understands the material. Our student council teacher, Mrs. Beam, has lots of great ideas and is kind and understanding. Finally, the activities at Eagleville. I'm in various clubs and activities such as the Art and Environmental Club, chorus, band, student council, and I am a safety. I like the Art and Environmental Club because I like to draw things in nature, and also we went on a fun trip to Barnes Farm and we got lost in a corn maze. These are the things I really like about Eagleville Elementary School. I'm really honored to be here today. Thank you.
All right, for your participation tonight, we're going to make you junior school board director member. Are you ready to take on all the responsibilities of being a junior school board member? Congratulations. All right, let's move on with the meeting. Announcements and executive sessions. The public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of the meeting for the purpose of rebroadcasting. There was an executive session the board held in the high school prior to this meeting for the purpose of discussing a student matter and for the solicitor to provide legal opinion on personal property tax complaint. In terms of attendance, we have everybody in the room except for Mr. Phillips, and Mr. Phillips has joined us on the phone. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate you calling in. And now I'd like to move it over to Dr. Zerby for recognition of guests and scheduled speakers.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening we have three scheduled speakers. We have a staff recognition, we have a Simons Fund screening appreciation, and I'll be presenting an update on the district strategic plan. This evening it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Xanthia Reddish. Each month I recognize faculty and staff of the Methacton School District for outstanding contributions to our students, their peers, and to our community. Dr. Reddish is here to help celebrate in recognizing two Eagleville staff members who have done outstanding work. Dr. Reddish?
Good evening, everyone. Will Mrs. Annette Kramer and Mrs. Jen Smith please join me? So earlier this month, we had the opportunity to recognize these two wonderful ladies here. Mrs. Annette Kramer is our school nurse at Eagleville Elementary. She cares so much about our school community, and the students count on her every day, as do I. She makes it her business to learn about the students and their families and all of their medical needs. And she's really adamant about building those relationships with the families and connecting with them whenever there are any questions or concerns, or even just to be a support. She spearheads all of our giving programs that help families in need. She also helps me out a great deal with the Watchdog Dad program. She coordinates their plans when they visit the school. And she's a positive role model for our wellness program. And she creates all kinds of activities and outings for the staff to participate in. So Mrs. Kramer is an asset to Eagleville Elementary family and a staple in the community. Mrs. Kramer. And we have Ms. Smith here, and Ms. Smith joined the Eagleville family just a year ago as a Title I math support aide. And although she hasn't been in the school for that long, she has made a huge impact in that she works with all of the students and tests them and provides additional math support. Always positive and professional. It's just a pleasure to work with her, and the students really benefit from the support that she provides. She works alongside Cindy Golden and also Abby Hollenbach, our math specialist in the building, and she provides a great support. So we are so fortunate to have you as a part of the Eagleville community.
So I apologize, they must love you because apparently they're there all the time, so thank you. I've never wanted her so much. I told her, you're never going to see them, and then they spend a lot of time there apparently.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reddish. Next on the agenda, sudden cardiac arrest. It is well documented that sudden cardiac arrest is the leading cause of death of adults in the United States. However, the numbers of children are not as clear because the causes of death in children were not tracked until 2013. It is the #1 killer of student athletes, however. It's responsible for up to 15% of all sudden infant deaths. The American Academy of Pediatrics estimate that 2,000 children die every year from sudden cardiac arrest. This evening, we have Darren Sudman, CEO and co-founder of Simon's Fund. Simon's Fund is a 501c3 organization dedicated to raising awareness of the conditions and warning signs that lead to sudden cardiac arrest and death in young athletes and children. On October 28, 2017, a large number of volunteers converged on the Methacton High School campus to provide well over 200 youth heart screenings. Among those volunteers were volunteer leaders such as Amy Smith, Methacton parent and Worcester Home and School president, Cheryl Pfeiffer, Methacton coordinator of nursing services, and Paul Spiewak, Assistant Principal for Athletics and Activities. This evening, we invite Darren Sudman to tell his story and for you to join with me in recognizing our volunteers for contributing to such a worthy effort. Mr. Sudman?
Thank you very much for having me here. It's been 13 years since Simon passed away, and we've performed over 50 heart screenings, screened over 16,000 kids, and you were the first school district to invite me to come speak and say thank you, so I really appreciate it. It's a very nice thing. I'll be brief. I loved working with the volunteers here and the staff. We, as you mentioned, screened over 200 kids. We've been providing free heart screenings for about 12 years. We partner with schools and then invite students between the ages of 12 and 19 to come and get their hearts checked because our medical community doesn't do it. I have learned over the last 13 years that it's interesting, peculiar, foolish that we require our kids to get hearing and eye exams in school, but yet we don't check their hearts. We know that heart defects are the #1 birth defect. We know that heart conditions are the #1 cause of death of a grown-up. And for some reason, for the period between 1 month of age and 50 years old until people are symptomatic, we just assume the heart is doing good. And that's not a good idea in my mind. So my wife and I decided we wanted to prevent other families from losing children to detectable and treatable heart conditions. We provide free heart screenings, as you know. We launched a crowdfunding website called Got AED that helps get AED devices into places where kids learn and play. We were behind the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Prevention Act, which is an awareness bill, and all of the parents in the room who have student athletes are familiar with the form they need to sign where they learn about sudden cardiac arrest. That law has been adopted in 11 other states as well. And we have a registry that helps gather data so that researchers can help answer some questions that we have, and we can do a better job of tracking the number of kids who have conditions, the number of families that have this kind of history, so that maybe one day we'll have fewer kids dying of sudden cardiac arrest and probably fewer adults because they'll catch these kinds of conditions earlier. So I really appreciate you guys letting us come here and screen. I appreciate you guys inviting me here to say thanks. And I meant to leave this. We just started doing this year. There's really no rhyme or reason behind it other than it's fun. But it's the operation guy, and we just thought that the kids would have fun writing on something, and it reflects the EKG leads and a couple other foolish things. So I'll leave that here for you guys. Thank you very much.
Ms. Smith, Ms. Pfeiffer, and Mr. Spiewak, do you care to provide any comments? Yeah.
I just want to take 1 minute. To publicly thank the Skyview physical education teachers, Elma Numerato, Jason Schultz, and especially Ken Kirshner for their determination in bringing Simon's Fund to Methacton School District. I should also thank Christina Bichetti, who is no longer with the district, but who also came and met with us parents 2 summers ago to help us brainstorm on how to establish a relationship with Simon's Fund. Colleen Rossi, who's sitting there in the audience, and Ken Kirshner had been advocating for this program for 8 years with the support of the high school nurse, Cheryl Pfeiffer. And Angela Lynch also helped us get the word out to the community. We're grateful for that, too. And I would also like to publicly thank Mike Ryan, Kim Larkinese, and Andrea Reese for checking in on occasion about our progress, and for Paul Winters for not only doing that, but also arranging meetings for us with administrators, and for also being in the gym with us the night before the screenings to help for a few hours to set up all that heavy equipment. Thank you, Paul. Ken Kirshner also made it a point to stop by the day of the screenings to check in, and the high school and Skyview nursing staff gave up their entire Saturday to help with the screening process. So thank you to you too. This nonprofit is doing important work, and the way our school community, from the school board to the staff, worked to support it was impressive. We parents, myself, Colleen Rossi, Tanya Green, and Meredith Miller, Meredith actually has long QT syndrome and discovered that a few months before we started this process, so she came on board as well to advocate for it. But we parents are grateful that we were heard and supported, and we hope that the district will continue to nurture this established relationship with Darren Sudman and Simons Fund. We can continue to advocate for our students through this partnership and offer them peace of mind and vital health information. Thank you.
I just want to invite the volunteers who attended tonight for this special reason, also nurses, to please come down.
Volunteers to come down?
Yes, please, come down for a photo.
We're going to have it in front here. Might as well hold this up.
Yeah, why not? Oh, we're going to have to get closer than that.
I'm going to leave this.
Thank you. Thank
Thank you, everyone, for their participation in the Simons Fund, and as well, I mean, this is, while it's a great example, it is an example of the many contributions that our parents and our community has made to better and improve the school community. So we thank you for that continuing contribution. Next on the agenda, we do have a strategic plan update. I'd like to ask the board members if they would be so kind to take seats in the front row, and we will start that presentation. The bigger font will go on the screen, folks. Well, good evening. It's my pleasure tonight to just give the board and the public a quick update on the strategic plan. You should know that it was about just a short few years ago that more than 100 parents, teachers, students, administrators, and community leaders came together and helped us establish some goals. And through that process, a plan was developed through 2022 that was divided into 4 focus areas: student growth and achievement, staff development, pupil services, educational technology. The second focus area, communications and community relations. Third, safety operations, operational technology, facilities and infrastructure. The fourth, district operations, financial management, human resources. And the last, co-curricular activities, extracurricular, and athletics. So over the summer, prior to the summer, you know that annually, as part of this plan, we provide a progress report to the board in April of every year. But this summer, like in every summer, we retreat and we look at the strategic plan and we look at the focus areas. The chairs have come back and provided updates, and this report summarizes those changes. Please note that this evening I'll be reviewing the strategic objectives that have been added. Underneath those strategic objectives will be a number of strategies and tasks and timelines. We're not getting into that detail here this evening, but certainly my concern is making sure that you understand some of the big picture changes that are coming forward and that we'd like to share with you in the community. And then the full plan, of course, will be available by the end of this week with all that detail associated with it. We're just cleaning up some of the cosmetic aspects of it. And so this evening I'm going to proceed and talk about some of those big picture items. So under the focus area 1, under student growth achievement, this is really our academic focus area, and it's probably had the majority of recommended changes to it, meaning additions. You should know that the first one is really designed as a process to recognize a method that we've started. As you recall, we did hire a K-12 career counselor. That career counselor was designed to provide a number of different resources and leadership opportunities within the district, one primarily being to help us implement the Chapter 339 plan, but in addition to that, to really create a career education set of services and programs and activities that relate to the career education and workforce standards adopted in Pennsylvania, and to ensure those academic and career planning is provided to all students and families, and advocating for the academic, personal, social, and career development of all children. The second area of development was under an administrative guideline that addresses the K-12 academic, social, and emotional programming and services considering the student need, resources, scheduling, and a number of other matters. And this one may not be as apparent to you as members of the public or the board, but certainly apparent to us and the administration, as well as to our staff, both faculty and staff together. You know that we've undertaken a number of different initiatives this year and over the last 2 years. That's been rather all-consuming for the effort of making sure that we make significant improvements within the district, both in our academic performance and our operations. It should be known that as part of the work that I've done and the work that I would normally do in communicating with the staff, the feedback, while it was tremendous, the feedback was also created the challenge to say that we ought to be able to better plan for the future, and to do that, we might be able to create a guideline that allows us to basically use as a structure to help any initiative, whether it's in the academic or emotional programming or other services that we need to encounter. So it's our goal to gather a group of constituents within the district to prepare an administrative guideline that will help guide us for future implementations of programs and services. The next item, still under Focus Area 1, should be known that we created a position a number of years ago that came out of the Office of Professional Development, and we renamed that position to be the Supervisor of Professional Development and Continuous Improvement. And with that job description, we've continued to make some adjustments to working with data. Data for making instructional and programming decisions is vital to our operation. However, there's a number of different practices, there's a number of different systems, and there's a time of and use of staff resources to get to that data and to use that data effectively. Our teachers are experts at looking at data and being able to interpret that to make substantial changes within the instructional practice. It's getting to the data, it's getting to the right data, it's providing the data that's meaningful to them so that we leverage their time as part of this process, as well as leverage our administrators' time as part of this process. So part of the goals, while we've been working on this for a little over a year, we wanted to at least get it into the strategic document to allow for us to keep this in the forefront and to work towards completing a process whereby we review all of the systems and the processes to make sure that what we're doing with data is the best practice and leveraging our available resources, both in systems and in people. The next item, to articulate a district-wide vision of STEM education, inclusive of our current practices, best practices, and input from stakeholders. This is really a takeoff of a strategy under Focus Area 1 that was in the original plan. We pulled it out instead of being underneath a different strategic objective. We pulled out to make it one that's more prominent in our work. As such, there's been a lot of work done in evaluating what we do within the current curriculum and how we leverage STEM education from the great work that we see every day in our libraries with the use of maker spaces and things of that nature, to our science classes, our technology classes, business classes. All across the district, you'll see evidence of STEM education included in this process. Under the original plan, our goal was to gather all this information, and we're just about complete with that. The goal then would be to include the outside community and to help us take a vision for the future of STEM education, or STEAM, or whatever we want to call it, as we develop that division and articulate it appropriately. And it's really a big deal because we have a lot of support behind us in not only our marketplace, but I think we have a lot of support from our Education Foundation. The Methacton Education Foundation has spent an enormous amount of time and resources recently to help bolster programs and services associated with STEM. And we believe that their fundraising efforts, along with our efforts in identifying and making the vision become reality, will go hand in hand and work well together. Next, under Focus Area 1, we have a plan to provide a program of activities and experiences that develop leadership growth and capacity from within the teaching, support, and administrative staff. And this, again, was built from experiences and conversations that I've had with teachers, that I've had with administrators, and that really play into building a fundamental capacity to strengthen our leadership within the school district at all levels, because we need leadership not only at the top, but we need leadership in every building. We need leadership on every team. We need leadership in all subject areas. It's critical and vital that we coordinate those efforts and provide experiences and opportunities to grow staff within the district. Next, we're on to Focus Area 2. Focus Area 2, while the strategic objective hasn't changed, we really feel that it's vital to make those connections with our home and school associations, the coordinating council, and it's really the path that will strengthen our relationship between home and school and create the advocacy necessary to support our mission. And we believe strengthening that relationship, getting back to having that partnership where we're presenting to the home and school presidents and where we're working with them in conjunction with major initiatives, we feel is vital to the long-term success and mission of the district. Under Focus Area 3, it's no surprise that we need to leverage the Master Facilities Plan to address the priorities of the Methacton School District's facilities and those needs. So while work is well underway, we really need to make sure that we put this in the forefront, and there's a number of strategies to help leverage that plan and progress going forward. Next, under Focus Area 4, District Operations, Financial Management, and Human Resources, while there's a number of strategic objectives within the plan that address all these areas. It's important to recognize that we believe that a comprehensive review and approval process will best communicate the of job descriptions, will best communicate the expectations and deliver a more coordinated effort of duties, tasks, and responsibilities within the district. So we look forward of creating a committee to finalize that process, make a recommendation to the board, and move forward with the process of getting all job descriptions reviewed and gone through an appropriate approval process. The next item, focus area 5, this is the co-curricular activities, extracurricular and athletics. There's no question that over the last maybe year or so, there's been a number of reasons and outstanding questions that remain within the processes and procedures associated with clubs and other extracurricular activities, and we think that we need to, again, add this as a focus point to make sure that we bring those questions to the forefront, get those answers, and get things documented in an appropriate process to ensure that we have a healthy and a relevant and diversified set of opportunities for our students that leverage the talents of our staff in the district as well as the qualified members of our community. So that finalizes the major objectives or the big picture matters that are new to the strategic plan. The major tasks that we're undertaking, I'm not going to read through all of these, but the major task for 2017-18 is to continue with creating the whole child resource guide, establishing an advisory committee for career education programming. We need to map out additional opportunities for future support of the STEM-based learning for all staff and students. And we need to solicit interest in plan activities targeted at internal leadership development and coordinate communications and strategies, methods, and tools. So those things are all outlined in the existing plan. In addition to that list, these last couple items, identify and adopt a standard learning management system, complete the interoperability measures to leverage our student information system with the critical data systems, measure school climate and job satisfaction, and to leverage the master plan to prepare for year 1 of the facilities maintenance and improvement projects. That's a list of all the major projects and goals that we have for this year. So in the big picture, I think it's important for the board and the public to understand that we're really talking about our continued focus on the whole child. This isn't just about a test. This isn't just about one subject area. It's really about looking at the social, emotional, cognitive aspects of the child and making sure that the appropriate resources are leveraged and available for all children to reach their greatest potential. The next, we need to certainly ramp up the effort on career education. While there's a timeline associated with this, we're working with the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit and a number of other districts in Montgomery County to work on the Chapter 339 plan. Our vision is that the career education process is much bigger than just a plan that meets a certain level of minimum criteria. While those things are important and they're going to play a major role in the work that we do going forward, we think that this is the real impetus of change for the district to make sure that our children and our parents of those children are well informed, well educated about all the decisions through their high school or through all their schooling career with Methacton, as well as when they need to choose whether or not to go into military workforce or into college. The next item, we need to certainly continue to work with the strategic articulation of the STEM vision. That's been ongoing, and that needs to ramp up, more. We need to improve our communications, connections, and advocacy. Certainly, we not only need to create those connections with our home and schools, but we need to strengthen those connections with our townships. We need to provide support to them as part of their initiatives, whether it might be economic development or maybe some other mechanism. I think the school district stands a good opportunity to support and to help attract businesses here into both townships. We need to address certainly some of the outstanding facilities and infrastructure needs. That's been well documented. I don't need to speak much more about that. The other big picture items increase our opportunities for students, whether it's in academic opportunities or in extracurricular, co-curricular athletics. And we certainly need to grow and develop our staff and improve on our efficiencies in the operation. So where does that leave us? It leaves us moving forward with work on addressing these goals. These were, the strategic objectives and some of the strategies. And then we need to make sure that you have on your minds right now that there is a midpoint review in the fall of 2018. So as part of the original plan, we need to invite the community and the committees back to participation to review the documents, get feedback on our progress, and then to certainly update that plan and continue progressing forward. That ends my presentation for this evening. I appreciate your consideration and listening to where we stand. My goal is that part of my communications to the public, either later this week or early next week, will include some of this information as well as links to all the updates and keep people apprised, as we have been, of the changes in the strategic plan. I think this is a lot of good work. Certainly, we've over, as I reported back in April, we've hit a lot of the targets. Some we've had to make some adjustments to. We document that. We use the plan as a true measure of seeing how we are progressing and what we need to do better. So your support and the support of the community is vital in making this happen. So thank you for your time, and we'll move on with the rest of the agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Now we'll move on to the next. All right. Moving right on to the reports. Up first will be the Finance Committee. Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Bourbon. You'll have to apologize if my voice goes out this evening. I'm a little under the weather, but I'll try and do my best here. The Finance Committee met on November 8th at 6:30 p.m. All board members were in attendance that evening, along with Dr. Zerbe and Mr. Bricker. Also in attendance were Representatives Linda Major and Vicky Mastro from Major and Mastro Audit Firm. The committee reviewed the list of bills in the Treasurer's report. There was also budgetary transfers. One note that there was a minor adjustment to the first budgetary transfer. There was a mix-up between the order there. That was corrected and is reflected properly this evening. We also reviewed the expenditure and revenue reports, and there was no updated healthcare report. The bulk of the meeting surrounded the audit review. As I mentioned, Linda Major from Major and Mastro presented the draft audit report for 2016-2017. Upon review by the board, it will be up for a board vote this evening. Ms. Major thoroughly reviewed the audit report with the committee and answered most of the board members' questions. She does have a couple of follow-ups, and she has gotten back to us since then. In terms of the audit, it was the opinion of the auditors that the financial statements were presented fairly and that there were no material findings. This is the exact wording that we're looking for. The district's net position for the year was a negative $111,206,660. This negative amount is primarily driven by the district's net pension liability. The district's unassigned fund balance at the close of the fiscal year was $7,318,083. The district's expenditures and other financing uses for the fiscal year were $851,371 lower than the budgeted amount, while the district's revenue was higher than anticipated by $266,692, which resulted in a surplus of $1,118,063. Upon approval this evening of the audit report, the audit will be available on the district's website. There was a quick update on the state budget. The revenue portion was signed by the governor the week before our meeting. Up next was the building departmental budget update. Mr. Bricker discussed that the departmental budgets are due back next week, which would have been a week or so ago, and that he will be meeting with the departments in the latter half of the week. There was some discussion about the Act 1 exception calculations. We had been told before that we do not qualify for the PSERS exception, but we did qualify for the special education exception. The committee wanted some more information on exactly how those calculations were met. It appears that like I said, the PSERS we do not qualify for, but the special education one is basically being driven by 3 areas: academic support, autistic support, and emotional support. If the board approved this exception, the Act 1 increase would be to 3.73%, up from 2.4%. It has been the Finance Committee's direction so far to stick to the Act 1 index and not seek exceptions, and that is the preliminary budget that we should see in January. There was a banking RFI update. Mr. Bricker completed the RFI, and it has gone out. Responses are due back by the end of November. And the last item was the variable rate bond, which the district has. We currently have 1 remaining variable rate bond. This bond is related to the Fields project and was topic of several questions I had had with PFM during prior committee meetings. Mr. Bricker was recommending that we consider looking to convert this to a fixed rate bond due to projected rate increases to the federal fund rate, which our variable rate is pretty much trends along with the SIFMA plus 70 basis points. The committee has agreed that this is something that we should consider, and Mr. Bricker would have more information by the work session. Just as a bit of an update on this, it appears that we will kind of keep an eye on this, but we are putting a hold on this for now. And let's see, old and new business, Mr. Winters thanked Ms. Hackett and Mr. Dorn for their service on the Finance Committee. And finally, courtesy of the floor, Mr. Andrews has also thanked Ms. Hackett and Mr. Dorn for their service and their preparedness for the meetings. The meeting adjourned at 7:43. Thank you.
Thank you. Now moving on to the Property Committee, Mr. Dorn.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. The meeting was called to order at 6:30. All members were in attendance. There was 3 discussion items on the agenda. There was 1 item of new business that we discussed, and then we had courtesy of the floor. Along with the minutes attached to the agenda, there's 6 attachments because we had several items that we discussed with our consultant, Fidavia. We discussed the master plan. We discussed the wrapping up of the 2017 summer projects. There's an attachment entitled Fidavia Summer 2017 Priority Work Summary. Work is substantially complete with the exception of some miscellaneous store hardware and investigative work that's underway involving 2018 projects. As a part of this investigative work, all the district's roofs, which total 133, because many buildings are kind of cataloged in segments with different types of roofs, have been inventoried and the conditions have been listed. This will be a part of our planning as we decide where to spend our capital funds in an area that's very important as our roofs. The committee also reviewed the 2018 high school MEP recommendations, first pass costs, the Arcola Auditorium costs. In addition, we reviewed the first pass recommended district-wide 2018 master plan projects. The current estimate is approximately $7.1 million. There's a Fidavia attachment entitled 2018 Master Plan Capital Projects. And then in addition, attachments entitled MHS, Methacton High School Mechanical and Electrical Upgrades and Arcola Auditorium Draft Scope and Budget are attached to the minutes. Item number B was the stormwater management project. The Conservation District has given verbal release on the new work that was completed from about the mid-May timeframe through the fall. We received a letter from Worcester Township, which is also attached. The district, however, has not been released on some of the main issues from the field due to soil conditions from the initial construction. This issue is part of a broader and ongoing litigation issue that is happening with the initial supplier. The lighting inspection has been completed and the lighting levels are at or below all allowable limits. There were 12 trees that there was a request that we reallocate them. They're not additional trees, but they were relocated from one portion of the project to another portion of the project, and we reviewed those. There's an aerial photo attached that shows that. And Dr. Zerbe has made an official request to Worcester Township to release a $20,000 escrow fund. He's awaiting a response from the township. Item C on the agenda was annual administrative projects. Committee reviewed the proposed miscellaneous building level projects. There's an attachment for that. These are projects that typically the high school principals bring to the attention of the administration that they'd like to complete in their respective buildings. These projects are reviewed by Dr. Zerbe, Mr. Fretz, and Mr. Bricker, along with the building principals, and this review is ongoing as we work through the budget to prioritize these projects so that we can make sure that we're addressing the most pressing needs within the school district. One item of new business was brought forward by Dr. Zerbe. He briefed the committee on a meeting he had with Lower Providence Sewer Authority. There's probably some families that are aware of this. There's work going on around the Eagleville School District, or the Eagleville School Building on Summit Avenue and Walker Lane with the Lower Providence sewer people. This work will impact normal bus ingress and egress of Eagleville. The township has assured Dr. Zerbe that they will provide necessary flag people to help facilitate traffic flow to the best of their ability. This project is expected to last approximately 6 weeks. We then had courtesy of the floor. Andrea Reese thanked the school district for new signs at Eagleville. She questioned the number of maintenance people at Eagleville. In addition, she inquired about the role of custodians during the lunch period. Ralph Navarrete recommended the property committee meet in December. He was told that he should take that up with Mr. Boardman, the board president. Mr. Andrews thanked Mr. Roth and Mr. Dorn for their contributions and service to the property committee. Additionally, he inquired about the action plan for the windows at Eagleville. Mary Hall also thanked Mr. Roth and Mr. Dorn for their work. She also commented on the heat pump located at the Arrowhead Modular. Meeting was adjourned at 7:28 p.m.
Thank you. Now on to the Education Committee. Ms. Reese.
We met on November 6th. Everybody was in attendance in addition to Mr. Ganesh. Our first topic was the 2017 state test results. Dr. Katona and Ms. Rickey reviewed the PSSA and Keystone results as well as PVOS and SPP scores. In addition to results, areas to address needs and a look ahead was given. These same results were shared at the board work session last week and will be available to the public. Next on the agenda was a gifted update. For the second year, a universal screening was given to second grade students. 340 students took the screening in October, with results available in November to be shared with teachers and principals to see who requires additional testing. Our COLA is also reviewing how to best serve gifted students, including more push-in and assisting regular education teachers. Next up was an early intervention update. December through February, the district and the MCIU will hold transition meetings for those students entering kindergarten in 2018. As of now, 29 students participate in early intervention, 12 children with developmental delays, 11 autistic children, and 6 who require speech and language services. Assignment fund update was also given, most of which you heard this evening, but just to reiterate, on October 28th, the district provided this valuable service to hundreds of children aged 12 to 18. To accommodate as many as possible, the event was extended an hour. Many thanks to all staff and people involved with the effort. A few students were referred for further cardiac evaluation. Mr. Ganesh gave us a Power School update. Report cards are ready to go, and since the meeting, they have been disseminated. Printed comments are available from a bank and can also be created free-form. A short tutorial will be available for parents to view. All teachers are trained, and we appreciate their efforts learning a new system. Mr. Ganesh also provided an update on the one-on-one initiative. We viewed a video showing the use of technology. 8th grade will be added next year to complete the 7 to 12 grade initiative. Currently, there are at least 150 devices at 8th grade's disposal. The committee did discuss how we use technology and wants to plan how to best utilize the technology that we offer our students and teachers. As always, the enrollment report was reviewed. During courtesy of the floor, John Andrews asked questions about number of testing days, early intervention, and arbitration update. Jen Basillo asked about 4th grade math curriculum and had some concerns. Megan Fitzgerald commented on concerns about the use of technology in schools, specifically limiting screen time. We adjourned a little bit before 8:30.
Thank you. Now on to the Policy Committee. Ms. Aubrey Larson-East.
Thank you. The Policy Committee met on November 1st. All the committee members were in attendance, Mr. Ryan, Ms. Reese, myself, as well as Dr. Zerbe and Mr. Summers. We had 4 policies on the agenda that had been previously discussed. 2 of those we determined needed further review and would be moved to the January 2018 agenda. 2 of them, Policy 706 on property records and 830 on breach of personal information. We determined we had sufficient information that we had requested and were able to move it to first read, which is on the agenda this evening. We had 6 policies that were recommended for first discussion. We had a number of them that were recommended for discussion by PSBA based on changes that they are making. As a result, they are combining different policies, and in combining those policies, we are now going to be repealing others because the content of that policy is being absorbed into another one. You'll likely see a couple of policies being repealed and some changes made, sort of a domino effect in the next couple of months. One correction that I have, Policy 202, and I apologize for not noticing this last week. The Policy Committee had recommended that we hold that for further discussion to January 2018, and it is on the agenda for first read tonight. So when we get to that, we'll have to take that off of there.
So we'll remove it. It won't go on for second reading until it gets before a committee.
Yes.
Got it.
Of particular note, Policy 819, which is suicide prevention, intervention, and response. We did have some preliminary discussion on this policy, but given the importance of the policy, we wanted to give the Policy Committee members sufficient time to really work with the policy and make sure that we are moving in the right direction with it and that we have everything that we need for a comprehensive policy in that area. We had 7 policies that were under a 5-year review. Several of which are on the agenda this evening for a first reading. We had nothing during old and new business. During courtesy of the floor, we didn't have anybody speak up, but we did have 2 students from the AP government class that were in attendance that night. The meeting adjourned at 8:56.
All right, thank you. Moving on now, we have the IU, Ms. Hackett.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Montgomery County Intermediate Unit Board meeting was held on Wednesday, November 15th at the old IU building on Main Street in Norristown. This building was reopened last year as the Early Learning Academy. The board toured the classrooms for the 2 pre-K programs that are conducted there. The Head Start classes, which is a federal program, that run from 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., and the Pre-K Counts, which is a Pennsylvania State program. The classrooms were wonderfully colorful and well organized for early childhood education with centers and project areas. Each one was quite different from the next. I was very impressed with what I saw. The IU does promote these programs on the Lower Providence Township TV channel for residents of Lower Providence. Mealy LLC presented information on the recently completed audit, noting that they gave a clean opinion and found no issues with the internal control policies and practices. The IU experienced a deficit for the year ended June 30th, 2017, and had a substantial increase in its share of the PSERS liability. Dan Sakala and James Miller of Fidavia presented options for needed renovations at this site, ranging from modest needed repairs estimated at approximately $3 million to complete renovation estimated at $12 million. The Government Relations Report noted that while the state continues to struggle with revenue challenges, the legislative branch ended the June 2017 year with a $95 million surplus, but that stays with the legislative branch. It was reported that the bond refinancing previously approved will result in $410,000 in savings, and it is with a fixed interest rate which begins at 2% and ends at 4%, and the blended rate is 3%. The IU participated in a drive to provide winter coats for children in several school districts and in the Head Start program. There will be 8 new members on the IU board in January as a result of the November election. Thank you.
Thank you. Now on to North Monco Technical Career Center.
That's me.
Herb, you're going to do it? Okay, thanks.
Yes, the JOC had their monthly meeting on Monday, November 20th. The primary topic of discussion was the appointment of the new acting administrative director. Dr. Charles Amuso was appointed as the acting director of the Tech Center. His start date would be January 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2018, if needed that long. Mike Lucas will step down as of December 31st. Dr. Amuso is very familiar with the Tech Center, has a very rich background, and also former superintendent of Souderton School District. Also appointed was the Amuso Group, LLC. That is a consulting services group that Dr. Amuso is part of, and that was hired to provide consulting services to the Tech Center on a period of just 10 days between the dates of November 20th, that day, and December 31st. It's all in part of the transition period. And they are receiving applicants, and I believe that the applicants, the deadline for applying for new directors is November 30th. The holiday dinner will be at 5 o'clock on December 18th, followed by the next JOC board meeting. And the JOC board will be having several replacements as well, as due to the election. I count at least 4 or 5. Thank you. End of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Now on to the student board representatives.
On November 3rd, Methacton High School hosted its annual blood drive, and students 16 or older could donate blood to the American Red Cross. Also, on November 9th, 10th, and 11th, the Methacton Theater Company performed A Midsummer Night's Dream, and the group had been rehearsing since September. On November 6th, the Harlem Wizards visited Methacton, and this event raised funds for Mini-thon. Attendees enjoyed the basketball game and the tricks on display. And lastly, members were inducted into the National Tri-M Music Honor Society on November 14th. The group had already started working on service activities such as the instrument drive. They are scheduled to perform in the spring.
Winter sports has officially started. This includes basketball, cheerleading, diving and swimming, wrestling, and indoor track. Basketball and swim had their first in-league competitions December 8th and wrestling the 9th. The talent show will be held this Friday, December 1st. Auditions were held last week and they've been practicing leading up to the show. There will be a holiday house tour. This is where you get to tour private homes that are decorated nicely for the holidays. This supports the Methacton Education Foundation, and tickets are on sale for $25. This will be held Sunday, December 10th, 12:30 to 5 p.m. And lastly, there is a movie night coming up to support the class of 2020. Tickets are $5. It will be held here in the LGI December 8th, 6:30 to 9, and the movie being played will be The Polar Express. Thank you.
Thank you. And now on to communications, Ms. Lynch.
Thank you. I'd like to use my time to bring some additional attention to a couple of items that are also related to the holidays. I'd like to thank Lauren for mentioning the Holiday House Tour. There will be 7 homes toured in Lower Providence and Worcester Township, and the event will be held on Sunday, December 10th, and as she said, tickets are on sale on the website. We have again invited our students to contribute original artwork to the district's annual holiday artwork slideshow. This acts as the district's holiday greeting card to the community, and so we've always received beautiful original artwork from students of all ages, and so we appreciate that. The deadline for sending in these projects is December 8th. Our holiday concert schedule begins on December 11th with Four Sisters Winter Concert and culminates on December 20th with the Methacton High School Winter Concert held at Arcola. These performances are a fantastic way to see the results of our hardworking music educators who work with our students throughout the school year, not only in classes but in lessons before and after school. Thank you.
Thank you. Now on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 3 items. The first one I want to bring to the attention of the public so that when we get to the portion under comments on board agenda items, I'm making a recommendation under new business for the following. Recommend to the board to approve a student settlement agreement for student number 530850283. Again, making a recommendation under new business that the board, I'm recommending that they act on that this evening to approve student settlement agreement for student 530850283. So we'll expect if there's any public comments that is held, those comments are provided at the regular public comments section of the agenda. Next on items that I want to speak about, I think it's appropriate that I hand these certificates over to the board president. This evening, there are 4 certificates, and I'll have Mr. Boardman read the proclamation, but they are specifically to address 4 members that have served the Methacton School District and wishing them the best of luck in their futures. Mr. Boardman?
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Before I read the formal document, I wanted to thank the 4 board members that this will be the last meeting for them. I appreciate all their efforts. I appreciate all their input and guidance on a lot of different matters that we've covered in the 2 years that I've been here. I'd also like to recognize Jim as being very well dressed up tonight. I appreciate that.
And that wasn't for...
I know you had an important, where I was going to go with that is I know you had an important family event tonight that you cut short to be here tonight, so I appreciate you showing up for this meeting, and I hope everything went well with the event. And, you know, I can honestly say I agreed with every one of the board members throughout the 2 years, and I disagreed with every one of the board members throughout the 2 years, and I think that's a sign of a healthy debate, healthy discussion around important items. When you have those healthy debates and discussions, you usually end up in a place that is the best decision for the school district. So thank you for all your efforts and all the hours that you have put in. Some of you have been here for multiple terms, and I appreciate you running again and signing up again for everything. So the official document is proclamation of the Methacton School District Board of School Directors. Whereas school board directors perform distinguished services to schools and communities through the contribution of valued time, support, and expertise. And whereas school board directors are committed to children, believe that all children can be successful learners, and the best education is tailored to meet the needs of the community. And whereas school board directors are responsible for ensuring the structure that provides a solid foundation for our school system, and whereas the school board directors are strong advocates for public education, motivated by the simple satisfaction of serving their community and ensuring excellence in the schools, and whereas they have contributed greatly to the prosperity of the Methacton community through their years of service as members of the school board of school directors. Now, therefore, be it resolved that members of the school board district of school directors go on record this 28th day of November in honoring the spirit of this exemplary service. Thank you. here's yours.
If I may add, Mr. Roth had 8 years of service, Mr. Phillips, 8 years of service, Ms. Hackett, 4 years of service, and Mr. Dorn, 2 years of service. Thank you so much for your commitment to the Methacton School District. Next on my report is a brief update on contract negotiations. The Methacton School Board had met as recently as November 20th, 2017 with the Teamsters. The discussions were largely centered on wages and benefits. I don't know, I thought I was hearing something.
The desk.
Oh, okay. I heard voices speaking to me. I apologize. The discussions largely, it was like settle the contracts, settle the contracts. No. The Methacton School Board met as recently as November 20th with the Teamsters. Discussions largely centered on wages and benefits. Discussions are progressing with our next meeting coming in a few weeks. As for MESPA, the Methacton Education Support Professionals Association, the board has not met for over a month or so, largely awaiting the settlement with the Methacton Education Association, specifically associated with outcomes in potential health care employee premium changes if that occurs. And lastly, as for the Methacton Education Association, the board has not met with the teachers for about a month or so as well. The non-binding arbitration dates are scheduled for the end of January, and it should be known that I recommended to both sides that they consider meeting before the arbitration period to see if they could close the gap on any differences that are out there. As the matters progress, we'll be keeping the public apprised on the district website, and we appreciate your patience in this matter. And that ends my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. And now the next item is the public comment on board action items. Anybody?
You have to read this advisement.
Hi, I'm Ralph Navarrete from Worcester. First, let me start by thanking Mr. Dorn, Mrs. Hackett, Mr. Phillips, and Mr. Roth for the last 8 years of service. I look forward to sitting in your seats next week. After last week's meeting, I thought long and hard about what I was going to say here tonight to address item 10F1 regarding the HR director position. I don't know if I was going to say anything at all, but I thought, as both a parent, a taxpayer, and an incoming board member, that it was too important for me to stay silent. The primary role of our board is not blind support, but dedicated oversight to the administration that we entrust to administer and operate our schools. Given the current reporting structure, one of the most critical roles that we have is ensuring the strongest possible cabinet is there to execute the day-to-day operations of our district and supports the strategic initiatives of the superintendent. I think it's important that we demand that the appropriate processes are followed, that a diverse group of candidates are vetted, and the best person for the job is ultimately hired. Those processes should have been undertaken in the spring when Dr. Harney stepped down and Dr. Sosnovic was named interim director. We could have undertaken at that time 2 concurrent evaluations, one to find an external candidate with specific HR qualifications, and the other to evaluate Dr. Sosnovic while he was actually performing the job. And while those 2 paths might have ultimately led to the same recommendation, we don't know because only one path was followed. It's unfortunate that Dr. Sosnovic has been put in such a tenuous and unfair position. As a team of 10, this group must communicate better. And I can assure you that starting next week, it will. However, tonight, a communication breakdown shouldn't be the reason to rubber stamp this recommendation. In my opinion, there's still time, and it would still be appropriate to advertise the position, allow candidates to apply, and then evaluate them on their merits. We owe our community the same due diligence that we applied to the last 2 director vacancies. I'm asking each of you to vote no on 10F1 tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Jim Malik, Worcester. Well said, Mr. Navarrete, and he's going to be a good board member. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to disagree. You got to run this like a business as opposed to what you're going to run it like. And you got to let your CEO, which is your superintendent, do his job. And my brother's a CFO of a $2 billion company. And I ran it by him, and they do promotions from inside all the time. And I think one of the reasons you do it is it's cost effective. And you have somebody from inside the organization who knows the ropes, who knows what's going on. You don't have somebody outside who you have to train, who's got to become familiar with what's going on. So here you have a situation, somebody already knows the organization, who's familiar with the people, who knows what's happening, who knows the people. Now, if you want to go and spend the time, the effort, the money, the resources to go outsource and find a bunch of people, bring them in, interview them, and when you have somebody who your CEO feels is qualified, and then try to get them up to speed, go ahead. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Doesn't make a lot of sense. When you have somebody already who's up to speed, who knows what's going on. Now, if you want to make the case that, it's board policy, well, you guys aren't following board policy anyway. You're violating board policy 011 on board governance by the way you treat the public. Don't sit here and quote board policy to me. When you start following board policy and treating the public with respect, then you can quote board policy to me. So I don't want to hear about board policy and you're not following board policy. I mean, you're allowed to deviate and use some common sense. So when it comes to using some common sense, letting your CEO do his job, I'm all for that. And this gentleman here, is this the gentleman right here? Seems like he knows what he's doing, he's a good guy, and he's qualified. So I don't think you're making a big mistake. I think there's a lot to do about nothing. Plan Con J. Can anybody tell me why, at this stage of the game, we're talking about Plan Con J, which should have been filed 5 years ago? Can you tell me? We're allowed to ask questions because I looked at your...
We're not allowed to answer.
Well, no, yes, they are. If you look at if you read this, you can't answer my questions because it says right on the front here, you're allowed to give me an answer. Can you tell me why?
No, I can't answer why, but can you please finish up?
Why is that?
Because I would appreciate if you'd finish up. Thanks.
Well, okay. Well, can you give me a breakdown of what the cost is?
It was it was mentioned at the work session that once this was approved, we were posting this for the public record to review all the costs, because as you know, the Plan Con J is the document that finalizes all the costs for those projects. So we are posting that and making it available to the public.
Well, here's my problem with that theory. You guys gave us the meeting minutes tonight, right? For all the different individual reports, right? Well, they're drafts. We got them. I got the Finance Committee minutes. How come we got those? Here's the Finance Committee meeting draft. Why couldn't you give us Plan Con J? I got the treasurer's report that you got to approve. I got the bills that you got to approve. Why couldn't you give me Plan Con J that you got to approve? Can you explain that? You guys can't tell me what Plan Con J's figure is for the total cost to us, the taxpayer? Can't tell me it's 40 million? Since you're going to sit there and approve that number tonight? You can't tell me why it's 5 years late? Can't tell me why you didn't file it on time? It's pretty bad. Chris, come on. Can't give me any answer to any of those questions?
I can't, but
Can somebody?
Do you know the totals?
I don't have them available right now.
Well, I got to be honest with you.
it will be posted soon, as
Well,
Dr. Zerbe
that's
said.
poor. I got to tell you, it's poor performance. Your new matter, the student settlement, that for your new matter, how much?
I've advised the board not to comment on the specifics of the settlement agreement.
Quoting what?
Quoting, per my advice, but as a result of concerns about the confidentiality of the terms of that agreement.
Yeah, quoting what law?
Quoting a variety of laws.
Give me one.
I don't have to provide my legal advice to you. I've given it to the board.
You're wrong.
Okay.
You don't have a law you're quoting? Quote me a law.
I'm well aware of the law, and I don't need to give my specific legal recommendation to you. I've provided it to the board.
Right. You can't quote me a law, can you?
I'm well aware of the law. I'm just...
No, you're not.
I've advised the board
That's the problem.
appropriately.
Right, I got you.
And consistently on this particular matter.
We've been through it before.
We have, and
you're
that has been the
incorrect.
advice each time.
You're incorrect.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Candy?
Candy Oliva, Eagleville. Just to correct your minutes from the property committee, meaning I did ask some questions about the windows. And yeah, I did ask Mr. Fetz about the leaking windows and maybe the water leaking behind the walls and that being checked to make sure we don't have any mold issues in the school. Okay. In reference to this settlement, until recently, the settlements were put in the agenda. The student's ID number was put in because of a matter of confidentiality. And when the settlement was put in the agenda to be voted on, the amount was put in also. Now, I looked at the list of bills. Would the $46,000 be the settlement? Because it's not confidential. Now, Mr. Bartle stated in the past they didn't want to put it in the agenda because they didn't want a slew of lawsuits. That never happened in the past. For years, when a board had to vote on spending money, it was put in the agenda for the public to see. Students' identification was never, ever made public. That is clearly against the law when they're a minor. And it would also state if it was a special education lawsuit. I can maybe check back in previous agendas that I had, but it's when you issue them an ID number, it is for confidentiality. So this was a choice the current boards have made not to make it public, but it is public when the amount of money is put in the list of bills. People just have to take time to look at it. As far as Plan Con J, maybe you should have had Dennis McCall here tonight, since I questioned last week about Plan Con J. Dennis McCall was also the business manager at the very beginning of the Skyview and the Woodland projects. Mr. Phillips can back me up on that, since he was also in this room. This is information that should be made to the public before you vote on it, not after the fact, because there might be some questions in there. It's too late to question you if you've already voted to approve it. If no one on this board has any idea what Plan Con J is, maybe Mr. McCall should have been standing here, since this is who you went to provide this information. That is unfortunately 5 years late. And that's another question, why did it take 5 years for us to get a final total? Now, it could be 40, 50, 60 million. I mean, people have been complaining for months about the cost of Skyview. But 10 years ago, everybody was for Skyview. So this information needed to be made public on the website, in an attachment, whatever, before you vote on it. Can't vote after the fact and expect the public to forget about it. But if you're going to pay Mr. McCall to do the work, he should be able here to explain it and let the board be knowledgeable about what they're voting on, because clearly you don't know what you're going to be voting on tonight. That is very bad for a board to be doing, voting on things they know nothing about.
Thank you. Anybody else? Whichever one of you want to go first.
Good evening. John Andrews, Lower Providence. I, among others, spoke a week ago in this room regarding the superintendent's recommendation to place Dr. Sosnovic in the position of human relations and labor relations, or human resources. But there were three directors that were absent at that meeting, so I think the discussions that we have this evening are valuable regarding this matter. I'm not an HR expert. There's some other areas I am an expert at. But the span of this job covers approximately 400 teachers, a number of principals, support staff. In total, we're 700 or 800 people on the payroll. And the number could go up if we take back the busing, for instance, or take back the lunch ladies. Not that men can't cook or do anything like that, but there's one discussion this evening is that we didn't follow policy. Another discussion is that we have a candidate primed for the job. But I think that clearly labor relations is a serious activity. We had a rare strike here in the last few months, and I don't pretend to know the details of why that happened, but it was a rare event. And I think that position, might require a bachelor's degree in some subject or another that's quite different from technology or chemistry or carpentry. So I think we ought to do an external search so that we do have the best person on the cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe.
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. I'd just like to comment on Plan Con J, that item 9E. I think Plan Con J, it's 5 years since it should have been filed with the state. I think that the CEO here, when he conducts his cabinet meetings, this probably should have been on an ongoing to-do list or in a folder for the facilities director. And every week when he meets with his cabinet, if he meets every week, he should ask, where do we stand on our Plan Con submissions? How are we making out with that Plan Con J that we didn't file for 5 years? I think the CEO, that should be part of that cabinet member's folder, and it should never go away until it's rectified, okay? And the CEO wants to make a recommendation to hire an HR director. Can't keep track of this. Was there any money lost to the school district at all? Does anybody know? You're not going to answer the question. But I hope there wasn't any money lost in the filing of this. But this is a public document. It should have been put on the website as an attachment to the agenda so the public can read their public document and comment on it when, if they have a question on it. I don't know what the big deal is with this, why it's so secret. And it should have never fell through the cracks if the CEO was doing the job. I also want to talk about, there's another credit card payment. It's a wire transfer payment to TD Bank for a credit card, and it just gives the total amount, some $3,000. It doesn't say what we bought. I think you should break down that wire transfer list to show the public what they bought, because if somebody wants to look through the minutes 4 or 5 years from now and they see a credit card payment to TD Bank, there's no idea of what it's for. Also, during the Finance Committee, there were problems with descriptions for payments. I believe Mr. Bryan brought up a couple problems with descriptions in the payments, the way they were put in, and they were wrong. Did these get changed to be filed in the minutes? Are they going to get changed to be filed in the minutes, or are we just going to run with the incorrect descriptions in the bills list? That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yep.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Cancro. I'm Worcester Township. I just wanted to talk basically about the position for HR. I do respect the superintendent and his position. I think his opinion is of high value, like a CEO. But I also do believe that you have a strategic plan in place, and that plan clearly says that you want to have job descriptions with the minimum requirements, and we want to make sure that you follow a process. So we have a process in place so that the public will see that we're always doing the right thing. I do believe your recommendation is of great value. So I just say, hold off, make sure that your cabinet that you want going forward is what you want it to look like. Make sure you have all the positions that you want to have. We fill it properly. We create the job description under each person the way it is, so that we're not going back filling, so that you have to work with them to create a job description, but it's already made. So that person has an expectation of what he's expected to when he takes that position. So I just ask you to hold off. Make sure you get your cabinet, what it looks like. Make sure we get the job description put in place, and then we go ahead and internally interview, and if we have to, then externally interview. I just think let's show the public we have a great process, and we're going to follow that strategic plan. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Next item is approving the board minutes. May I have a motion to approve the board meeting minutes of the work session held on October 17th of this year and the regular meeting held on October 24th? Second? Any discussion? All those in favor? And it passes 9-0. Next item up is fiscal items. Mr. Bricker.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Tonight for your approval is the list of bills, the treasurer's report, budgetary transfers, the acceptance of the audit report for 2017, and submission, approve the Plan Con J submission.
All right, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the list of bills, treasurer's report, budgetary transfers, audit report, and the Plan Con J?
Can I recommend that we split out item E?
Does anybody want it? Yeah, that's fine. You can go ahead and do that. All right, then let me revise that. May I have a motion to approve the list of bills, treasurer's report, budgetary transfers, and audit report? Second. Any discussion? Yeah, Jim.
On page 6, there is, forgetting already. On page 6, there's a settlement for $34,163, and on page 9, there's one for $46,025.
Are you talking about the list of bills, Jim?
Yes.
Okay.
List of bills. So This sort of ties in with any settlements that we have in student ID numbers. What is the theory in not posting these numbers on a board action item on a settlement? Maybe that would help the public understand the methodology of why we don't do that and how it protects the district and the taxpayers on future claims or potential what a litigant can get out of us as a settlement.
To that question, there are a couple of points I would make. One is one of the rationales for not including the specific item and the specific dollar figure in the agenda is there is a concern that the settlement agreement itself may constitute an educational record of the student. And there may be individuals within the district who are aware of the fact that a settlement is being proposed, but do not necessarily have access to the information as to the specific amounts in question. And so by not announcing the amount of the agreement at the same time that it is being proposed for approval by the board, it reduces the risk of more individuals who are aware of the particular student or the particular case becoming aware of the specifics of the settlement agreement. That is a primary factor. Another factor is certainly potential litigants against the district. Making it known the specific amounts in certain cases could be problematic, but it's the concern about revealing information to certain individuals, primarily within the district, who don't have an educational right or a legal right to know information about the student, the terms of the settlement that is being proposed. I know that's the explanation that has been given in the past at board meetings, and that is certainly one of the primary rationale for the recommendation.
So under, we'll say, the Sunshine Law, where we're to take a vote on a motion, and as far as the details of that and satisfying, where does that fall in under Sunshine Law?
Sure. The key factor under the Sunshine Law is that and under the school code is that the board members themselves are aware of the terms of a proposed settlement. There is a question as to the accessibility of a settlement agreement under the Right to Know law, but again, there is a difference between actively posting details of a settlement agreement versus providing perhaps certain aspects of a settlement agreement in response to a right to know request after significant analysis with regard to each particular case and that particular request is done.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Jim. Any other questions? All right, all those in favor? And the motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to 9E. May I have a motion to approve the Plan Con J? Second. Any discussion? Kim, we can start with you.
So in a recent board memo, it was mentioned that Tim Bricker would be able to provide some context or explanation regarding Plan Con J. And Tim, I apologize for putting you on the spot like this, but what information can you give us that will help alleviate some of the questions that have been raised so far tonight?
The only information that I really have is that the plan is being completed by Dennis McCall. He's been reviewing the information and compiling the numbers to submit for the state. What this is in regards to the interest reconciliation that occurs with regards to the bond. Once this is submitted, a reconciliation will then be done by the state, and then the state will determine, based on that reconciliation, if any funds are due the school district.
Any other question? Jim? Yeah.
Sure. First thing I'd like to know is the time, Plan Con J was supposed to be filed 5 years ago. Who was responsible for making sure that happened at that time? Was that the business manager at that time? And who was the business manager at that time? And as far as the superintendent, who was the superintendent at that time? And where were we? And I'll go with my next question after that.
I think in order to address the question of why wasn't it submitted in the period of time that it should have been, it wasn't brought to my attention until such time where about a year ago when Mr. McCall was actively engaged in the district to support me and the administration as part of not only a search for a new business manager, but to provide, support services. Going through the records, he did determine at his initial week of service with us that those documents weren't filed in the fashion that in the time that they should have been. So he under my direction, began gathering all the information associated with that, going through all the documents associated with that, going back in the archives to gather it's basically the end cost of the entire project. And he has now, completed that work, and we are, and before the board, letting you know that we would like to submit the plan, and certainly if it is more appropriate for the board to see the documents and have those discussions, I'm fine with putting this off till, say, a January timeframe, if that makes more sense. Our issue was certainly, Dennis's time with us will end here in December, and we certainly needed his expertise to finish the filing of the documents. With that, knowing that, because he cannot work for us any longer than that time frame, we felt it was appropriate to know that we get your approval to submit the documents, and the end cost will be the end cost. There's nothing to debate or to challenge on that, and that's why there isn't a document before you, because it's not there.
Okay, with that being said, and end cost is end cost, agreed. When Dennis McCall sought employment elsewhere, what did he leave behind for the next business manager? Did he leave a list of items that had to be completed? What was left behind for his successor so they wouldn't miss time issues? Is there any other issues that should have been picked up? And the rub is that here's a guy that left the district, didn't leave it nice and clean and neat for the next guy. And when I came on the board, one of the things I wanted was a forensic audit of the district for various reasons. And now he comes back to fix it. So, I'd like to know how this ended and how he set it up for the successor and how it fell through the cracks, because something like that shouldn't have fell through the cracks. That should have been on a whiteboard, like, hey, get this thing filed by such and such a date, and that should have been passed along.
I think, Mr. Phillips, I can't disagree with you in terms of, it should have been pretty obvious, but it wasn't necessarily to me. The challenge is, I wasn't here when the transition occurred, and I can only deal with the information that I have. So when it was brought to my attention, I ensured that this matter was getting addressed, and it did take a significant amount of time. And we didn't have Mr. McCall working for us daily. He would come in maybe for a few hours once a week at best, and he would sift through the documents associated with completing the reports. There was a lot of legwork associated with this. I think that this is what we need. We need the board to approve us to submit for the Plan Con so that we can adjust our rates and, complete this process. So I can't tell you what, in history, what else should have and shouldn't have.
Well, with that being said, and this is one of the things, sitting on the other side of the table for 4 or 5 years before getting on this side for 8 years, and feeling that there should have been a forensic audit done at that time in the district. But with that being said, I'd like to amend the motion to table it, and for a timeline to be generated of how that was passed to its successors, how it dropped through the cracks, so that doesn't happen in the future, being that we have a turnover history of business managers, I'll say, in the last couple of years, and some other departments possibly. But I think there's something there that has to be learned, and have the numbers, have a draft, and have a final PowerPoint presentation how you got to the numbers. And that's what I'd like to make the motion to table.
I second the motion to table.
So right now, we have a motion to table it and a vote, and we have a second. All those in favor of tabling it?
Can we have further discussion before we...
There is not a discussion period with regard to a motion to table. It could be voted down, discussion could occur, and the motion could be made again. But in terms of the procedure, the vote does take place immediately after the second to the motion to table.
All those in favor? All right, it's unanimous. We'll table that. But
Could I just get some direction from the board? So based on Mr. Phillips' recommendation, would the board like me to, follow through with those recommendations?
I think we need to rethink some of those recommendations, not to disagree with Jim, but some of those recommendations require information from history, which all those people are no longer here. So there might be some challenges with trying to build out the historical timeline there.
Dennis McCall's still here.
Well,
so, and I would say he started it.
I'm sure he can provide some of the information, but just trying to build that overall view that you were visioning, Jim, I think there might be some gaps in terms of knowledge internally, because all that took place before our current team was in place.
Well, let's see. The gap started when Dennis McCall left his job and it didn't get filed, and the gap got closed when he came back to say it was not filed. So, the people in between are irrelevant.
I agree with that, but, in terms of what the superintendent was doing and all that those are the gaps. Okay, we can move on from that then.
Well, can I just make one comment to follow through with Jim there, and I don't want to muddy the water, but I do think I think it would be very difficult to put together the chain of events that happened, right? Because you had a business manager leave, you had a superintendent leave, whether Dennis handed it over to, I'm assuming it was Stewart, who was the next, we won't know. That could be a he said, she said, probably not much to be gained from that discussion. What I do think there's some value in is having a mechanism to track these types of things that supersede people. So, I think between Dr. Zerbe and Mr. Bricker, you ought to think about a tracking system for when we have these types of trigger events that just supersedes anybody who leaves or gets sick or whatever might happen. So perhaps you could give some thought to that and come back to the board with some recommendations around that.
All right, thank you.
And if I could just follow up with that, combining the two comments, it may be useful to see if there are any other issues that happened during that time frame that still need to be addressed. And if Dennis McCall is here, perhaps that could be one of the things that he does before he leaves. what that list was.
I can, well, let me just address that. There were some things that we needed him to do, specifically help us with some budgetary matters as part of the interim service, but most of those other, I'll call them cleanup things, have been addressed and have been taken care of. So this is by far the largest outstanding issue and has taken the most of his time that we're here.
So you're saying there's nothing else outstanding?
He's not aware of anything that needs to be addressed, nor am I.
Okay.
How about under Stewart's watch? Is there anything, I mean, it goes back to the whole changeover of people, so, I mean...
So your comment about, having a mechanism that, allows for a system of issues to be tracked, I mean, that's a fair, simple thing to do, yeah. That's, if it's okay with the board, I think that's the appropriate mechanism for us to come back and share.
Yeah. Anything else? All right, let's move on.
Wait, are there any penalties involved with this late filing? It can get expensive if there are. I mean, that has to be brought up.
Moving along on to the personnel items.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the board's consideration tonight, we have 2 resignations classified, 3 employment classified, 1 employment for a long-term sub classified, 1 administrative change of status, 1 classified change of status, 1 uncompensated leave professional. We have the extended season pay in the attachment, along with a supplemental contract for a freshman boys basketball coach at the high school. We ask you to approve, add Mary Wood to the classified substitute list, approve the list of volunteers, 1 community ed individual as a lifeguard, and I would like to draw your attention to the job descriptions and ask the board to only take consideration on items 2 and 3. Per the board's direction at the work session, we have already started to draft the job descriptions for the board secretary and omit some of those pieces from the secretary to the superintendent. We will have those for your consideration on December 4th. And that is it.
All right, thank you. So we'll pull out F separately. Does anybody want anything else pulled out separately? Okay. So, may I have a motion to approve?
Can I stop you for one second? I'm so sorry. I'm under the weather as well. Sorry. I'm under the weather as well as Mr. Ryan is. I'm having difficulty hearing because of some of the comments on the floor, so I apologize, but if we could keep our voices down, I'm having trouble hearing some of the conversation that's going on. Thank you.
I am so sorry.
Being in the very first row, your voices are traveling up here.
Well, I'll whisper in your ear then.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so for the first motion, we'll include personnel items A, B, or A through E, G through O, and then P modified to only include 2 and 3. May I have a motion to approve all those personnel items? Any discussion on any of those, Mike?
Just one quick question on H, change of status classified. It has the effective date of to be determined. We have not set a date yet for when that will occur.
That is correct. We are in the hiring process currently for Miss Mandia's replacement at Eagleville. With any optimism, if we were able to find a candidate earlier, we'd like to start the transition process while Ms. Coons is still in her seat to make it more seamless in that office.
Okay, perfect. That's what I was a little concerned about, was the transition there, so thank you, Trey.
All right, any other questions? All right, all those in favor? Thank you. Motion passes. Now, item 10F, to approve the change of status of Dr. Troy Sosnovich from interim director of personnel to director of human services and labor relations with no change in salary effective November 28. May I have a motion? Second? Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to say something, because I did not have the liberty of doing anything,
Sure.
making anything, and pardon me, my voice is starting to go, I don't know why. But I wanted to say that when your superintendent brings somebody that he wants to have in his cabinet, part of my decision-making process is to understand why he wants to do that. And if I have a question, I have access to the agenda as a board member. I can pick up the phone or text him and talk to him, ask him about that. I've known Troy ever since we brought him into the district from the IU. I know him to be a competent man, very good at what he does, takes on challenges full throttle and goes with them, as he's done with our technology department. And I know that I will be supporting him. I think he's done a good job in the district. I think he would be a good HR director. Sure, he's going to learn, he's going to make mistakes, but you know what? It's what you do in order to become better. You learn, and you learn from things that you have come across. Some things don't work out. But I believe that if Dr. Zerbe wants him in his cabinet as his HR director, then that is the way to go. And as a board member, I'm in total support of that. Thank you.
Thanks, and the losing the voice seems to be catchy within the board tonight. Any other comment? Brenda, yeah.
I think that the superintendent really does have the authority to hire people for this high-level position. I think it shouldn't be done without regard to things such as job descriptions and requirements that have been stated. I think that a bit of wisdom would be to actually do the process of seeing who the candidates are who might be available for such a position, including Dr. Sosnovic. One of the things that I believe is on the job description for Director of Human Resources and Labor Relations is either a degree that has a specialty in that field or a certain period of experience for that. At the moment, Dr. Sosnovic is serving as Interim Director of Personnel, and my experience with him in that, which has been since June, has been that he has really taken on this job and is working it as well as he possibly can. I do think that there is a gap that in his resume, from what I understand, because I haven't heard anything to the contrary, that he really doesn't have a background in personnel or human resources and labor relations. The fact that he is currently serving as interim director of personnel and is taking to the job suggests that this, at the moment, could be a very good situation. It seems to me that that could be extended for a period of time with perhaps a program of study in the area of personnel, or human resources as we call it today, which I think would bring to you a much higher level person in that very important role. Who we have working in the district, which is guided by the Director of Human Resources, is the most significant thing that we have to offer for our children. And so I would not be inclined to support this, but would sort of suggest that perhaps a continuation of the interim period with some professional development.
I'm very glad I let Brenda go first so I can save my voice. I will say, well, I agree with 100% of what Brenda just said. So along those lines, I would make a motion to table this. I don't want to have to vote no for this. So I would like to make a motion to table
second.
this.
All those in favor of tabling this? So we got it?
Continue.
Well,
You just take the list.
I'm going to make a motion that we...
Is there anyone opposed?
Anybody that opposes? Okay. Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion to open it back up, that we hire Troy as our HR director. Anybody want a second? You got a second? Discussion? Good. Well, sitting here 8 years, sitting here 4 or 5 years before that, seen a lot of people come and go. The whole job of the superintendent is to run the district. The board doesn't run the district. That's the reality. The board will make decisions on money. If Dave was, for example, creating a new position, and he said, my neighbor needs a job and he wanted to put in there. Okay, I could see where there'd be a lot of questions and a lot of people being upset. Here's a guy that's been there for 7 months, and the superintendent has the confidence. Mind you, the board just voted for another 3-year contract at the end of this current contract with the superintendent, and saying that, hey, we trust your judgment, we like the job you're doing, and you're running the district. So we have, I thought, that kind of trust in our superintendent. So now the superintendent recommends that he wants this guy working for him as HR. Well, the board, okay, well, now we don't trust them. We don't trust our superintendent. We don't trust the people in our administration. So that's the message we're putting out there. And we're going to second guess Dave, which then the administration, all the staff through the school district looks and says, boy, the board just gave this guy a new 3-year contract, gave him a raise, and they don't trust him to make the right decision. The funny part about it is, okay, we'll go have a committee, find a guy, hire the guy, and say the guy gets hired and he's running the HR department like the bus department, okay, and the scheduling. So now the board's upset because this guy's doing a crappy job running the bus department, and they go to Dave, what are you doing with this guy? What are you doing about it? Dave can throw his hands up and say, hey, you guys hired him. I had my recommendation. I felt this was the guy that I could work with. This guy we hired, I can't work with him. So, in having employees of my own, hiring people to do certain jobs, if somebody from the outside said, you know what, Jim, you should hire this guy to paint the stripes on the lines. Problem is, he has a vision problem, but he's a buddy of this guy that told me to hire him. I know the job that has to be done, just as Dave knows the job that has to be done in the district. We're just here to make sure laws are followed, policies followed, and worrying about a blank check. The biggest blank check that has to be worried about is the board members. They're the ones with the biggest blank check here. So the message that I guess we want to put out there is we don't want to hire within. We don't want to promote from within. We want to, bring somebody in as interim. Then we'll mess around a little bit. We'll have a committee, drag it out for a couple more months, maybe hire somebody, maybe hire him. What a waste of time.
Jim, I think you're misrepresenting some of the concerns that we shared here.
Well, the concerns, if you have concerns, I guess the superintendent's not doing his job.
No, I think that I can understand why you would misunderstand, because these were concerns that were expressed last week when you weren't here.
Those concerns were expressed by the minority of the board. We
Okay.
came into this meeting with the majority of the board supporting this. So
I beg to differ.
I'm beyond frustrated with the underhanded approach that just took place to put this into a very awkward public position.
Not at all.
And very disrespectful of the whole process.
Mr. Boardman, I want to reiterate that, or not reiterate, I want to explain. Not at all. In fact, I think it's the reverse of what Mr. Phillips is saying and your perception of it. I had a very long talk with Dr. Zerbe. It's actually the reverse. The reason to table is to respect Dr. Sosnovic. The
reason to table
No,
was-
excuse me, let me
brought-
finish, please, let me finish. Let me finish, please.
Oh, just like you let me finish.
The
I had
reason
floor, by the
being
way.
is that I don't want to vote no, but I have a concern about the job description that we have not yet completed. That is it. That is my issue. For example, we have something on our strategic plan that was discussed tonight about safety. I don't know where that falls because Dr. Sosnovic had it under him prior. So I would just like a little more time to work out those job descriptions before filling it. That's it. And I stood here and supported Dr. Sosnovic last week, and I continue to do that. It is just that we were in a crunch, and we did not have a chance to do that. I'm not going to put any blame on anybody for that. I also do agree with you, Mr. Phillips, and Mr. Navarrete, who spoke about the board here to support our superintendent. I say on record, for you said that we give the impression of not trusting. Absolutely not. Ms. Alabak, I am not yelling. If I seem loud to you... Okay, well, okay. So, please, the comments.
Okay, can we stick to
So
the board?
We understand this is very difficult because I have the utmost respect for both of the gentlemen involved here. It is just a matter of crossing our T's and dotting our I's. And I'm sorry if that bothers people, but I don't want to vote no because this is the livelihood of a person and our district, and it won't hurt to wait a little bit longer.
Well, here's the thing. You have a question that is the difference between your yes and no, and it sounds like you're leaning more towards yes. So when we had this discussion, would that one question or two questions that you would have to know tonight to make your vote from a no to a yes? You know, like milling this stuff for months on end is just a colossal waste of time on the board side, the administration side, the taxpayer side, sitting here meeting after meeting. You know, nothing ever gets finished. It's just everything's out in limbo. And eventually, what's going to happen is you wear out the administration enough that they don't want to fill the vacancies. It's a small industry out there in schools, and nobody wants to work here because, A, they watch these meetings, B, they talk to other people in the business, and they say, there's no way I'm going to come to this school district. And then if you undermine all this, every recommendation or second doubt or grill the superintendent on every single recommendation, as minute as it could be, eventually the superintendent says, you know what, see you later. And then you guys are going to look for a new superintendent, new business manager, new HR guy. You guys are going to be pros at finding new people. So, you know, so what is that one or two questions that goes from a no to a yes? I mean, maybe they could be answered tonight so we can move on and so we can put something else on the plate of the board instead of 15 minutes, 20 minutes of talking about this.
Let me try and answer some of what you're asking for, Mr. Phillips, and I don't mean to speak for Ms. Reese, but I can tell you that a couple of the things that I would like to see before I would feel comfortable voting on this matter. I would like to see a job description. We are voting to hire someone as the Director of Human Resources and Labor Relations. I'd like to see a job description for that position. As of last meeting, I'm not clear that we had a job description for that position. So that is item one. Secondly, I'd like to see a plan in place for how we are going to cover the responsibilities that Dr. Sosnovic, previously held in his prior position. I have made it clear, both publicly and in private conversations with Dr. Zerbe and Dr. Sosnovic, this has absolutely nothing to do with Dr. Sosnovic, with his performance in this position on an interim basis. I've had nothing but positive, respectful interactions with him. I think he's done an outstanding job of getting up to speed in a very challenging environment. It has nothing to do with him as a person or his ability to do the job. It has everything to do with what the process is.
Well,
let me, Jim.
one of the things here is, your conversations with Troy, with Dave, I don't understand how the board members are talking to administration, so there has to be some chain of communication or structure in which board members don't randomly talk to administration and give them certain assignments or take their day up in certain times. And that's why you have a board president and you try to go through the board president. But as far as job description, well, we had an HR guy prior to him for many years. Is he fulfilling the duties of Bob Harney? Is he meeting all those requirements, doing all those duties? And I'd have to say he's probably doing that because, we're not
But that's
in a
what I'm
crisis.
saying. We don't know if he's doing that if we don't have that job description in front of us. That is why
Motion to move the discussion. Kyle, you can correct me if
To call the question is the motion. So there was a call the question does require a second. It's essentially to have the vote on the motion that is currently before the board. Is there a second to that motion?
Wait a second, Kyle. We're not done talking.
That is an item for the board to decide. There's a motion. No, there is a motion to call the question. There's a second. There's an immediate vote on this, and it requires 6 votes to stop the discussion.
That's great, except we didn't follow protocol when other people were jumping over people, having their conversations, so there wasn't a rule to order as the conversation proceeded. I sat quietly listening to a lot of this crap that was going on here, and quite frankly, I'm embarrassed for Dr. Sosnovic, okay? So I'm going to get my say in one way or another. I'll do it under new business if that's how I have to do it.
So it does require 6 votes to have the vote take place immediately. There's a motion, there's a second. Pursuant to the rules that this board has decided to follow, there is a requirement of taking a vote on whether to have the vote on the motion that is currently before the board currently. So there should be a vote on whether to move right now directly to voting on the motion that is before the board. And that vote should take place right now on whether to move directly to voting on the motion. That is the procedure.
Okay.
And it requires 6 votes to pass to move directly to voting on the motion. It's a 2/3 majority.
It won't get 2/3.
Yeah, it won't get 2/3.
You should take the vote.
Yeah, okay. I second it.
There's a second, so you just need a vote on calling the question, moving right to voting on the motion that is currently before the board.
All those in favor?
So it fails. Discussion continues.
Discussion continues. Do you want to go next?
Sure, thank you. Listen, I mean, there's a lot of conversation here that's going on. I do feel sorry for Dr. Sosnovic. It kind of reminds me of the discussion that went on when I got put on the board. And, that's not a pleasant thing. Let me first address Mr. Navarrete. Nobody that sits at this table rubber stamps things. That's an insult. All right? And I think that was way out of order, especially for a new board member that's coming on. So you need to kind of learn a little bit about what it takes to sit in the seat and make comments. Number two, there was a discussion about some of the master plan today. There's a bullet under major tasks for 2017-18 that specifically says solicit interest and plan activities targeted at internal leadership development. Very important part. This is a key cabinet position. And being a key cabinet position, there's really one person that should assess the requirements of their cabinet, and that is the superintendent of the schools. It's his cabinet. And I think that many of the board kind of forget that, as they do often in cases, forget what a board's responsibility is for governing and sitting in the board. Let me add a couple other things to this. I hired probably more than 200 people throughout my career. And oftentimes, you have internal succession planning that goes on. Part of internal succession planning is the head of that group taking the responsibility to move people and develop people in order for several things. One, for professional growth. Two, for retaining key people that can add value to your enterprise long-term. Three, it enables employees that sit in key administrative positions that really probably are somewhat topped out to grow and fulfill their own personal development requirements without the district losing them and spending potentially thousands upon thousands of dollars in a retained search. And all of this is kind of what Dave put together when he made the recommendation to the Board of Troy. There's probably going to be many loose ends that need to be figured out as far as specific individual or secondary or tertiary tasks that maybe get divided differently because you have a skill set shift from one position to another position, which is kind of what we're talking about with Troy. There could be some tasks that he retains that he had in his previous position that follow him to the new position because he's the best person to deal with that. That's also something for Dr. Zerbe to determine. That's not necessarily a level of task that the board should be tackling, because Dr. Zerbe is responsible for how the work is divided across his cabinet and his administration. There are a lot of successful people that shift careers and advance in different parts of the career to grow and develop. And quite frankly, I applaud Dr. Zerbe for having a little bit of forethought that we now have personnel potentially in Dr. Zerbe, potentially Dr. Jason Sorgini, that could be potential assistant superintendents if the board ever determines to put that into a position, or potential succession to a superintendent's job that have been homegrown, that have been development, that understand the values of the school district and can continue with some of those traditions instead of bringing somebody in from the outside every single time. And I think this board loses focus on the importance of maybe not putting a professional HR person into a position versus looking at the internal development and advancement of people and growing their careers and retaining talent that is critical and key to this school district to continue to flourish. And, you know, I highly recommend that we go with Dr. Zerbe's recommendation. I don't see that there's a reason to delay on that. At this point, I agree with people when you say he doesn't have core HR experience. He has exhibited initiative in and getting his doctoral degree. He has certainly shown the ability to grow and take on different tasks. There may have been people at one time or another that said, well, he's the technology guy, why should he be the child safety guy? Gee whiz, did you have any experience in child safety before they asked you to do that, Troy? Probably not. Didn't stop him from getting that job. Didn't stop Dave from asking him to take on that requirement. We're splitting hairs, but I really do think that we need to allow Dr. Zerbe to make key cabinet selections, and I think it's okay for the board to say, listen, we think he ought to have a developmental plan that maybe is tied to any salary increases, that we'd like to see him get continuing education in certain areas to round out his experience in this. But we ought to applaud him that we've got a superintendent that is having a little bit of foresight to say, gee whiz, it'd be great to have a succession plan for growth into a superintendent's position.
One last comment from me. So as board president, one of your roles is to manage a meeting and what happens at a meeting so you don't embarrass employees, like what was just happened. So before the work session, I talked to board members individually to make sure that we have support of this decision, because the last thing you want to do is bring somebody forth for this and not approve it. Between the board work session and this meeting, and I checked in, and there was still enough support. So Dr. Zerbe and I came to this meeting, and Dr. Sosnovic, under the thought that there was support for this. And then what just happened was clearly manipulative and making decisions to change the process at the last minute without informing the school board president, without informing the superintendent. To me, this puts our school board in a very embarrassing situation. And honestly, given that that was the approach that was taken, as opposed to coming to me or the superintendent, I have a hard time trusting the rest of the board members anymore. And over the next month, I'll be determining whether I want to stay on this board or not.
Well, for starters, I do beg to differ with that. I was under the impression, based on my conversations, that the support was not 100% clear. Then we must have been having different conversations with different people. But the other statement that I'd like to make is that I was elected to this position to vote the way that I see fit. And that doesn't mean that I make up my mind on how I'm going to vote before I walk into this room. Sometimes I'm presented with information that changes my mind. Sometimes I am not. But it's not up to me to inform anyone of exactly how I'm going to vote and then stick to that decision before I come into this room. That would be disingenuous.
Any other discussion? What motion?
So just to be clear, and I think if Mr. Phillips, it was his motion, so if he could just confirm this, it is essentially to approve item F1, approving a change of status for Dr. Troy Sosnovic from interim director of personnel to director of human resources and labor relations, no change in salary effective November 28th, 2017. This is a replacement position, is that correct?
Correct.
All those in favor?
I can just clarify. Sure.
Tabled it, so I'm sorry, I just needed.
The item was tabled, and then there was a new motion to take the same action.
Reopen it.
No.
There was a motion to take the exact same action. So the item that is currently being voted on is item F1, approving the change of status from interim director of personnel to director of human resources and labor relations.
Kyle, I have a question. I have sat at this table and voted to close a school. I have done a lot of things that were difficult. In response to Chris's comment, I spoke to him that I was uncomfortable with this position, and I spoke to Dr. Zerbe that I was uncomfortable in this position. I was elected and agreed to do a good job, but how am I able to abstain from this? Because I'm not comfortable with this.
As a board member, you have the authority to abstain. I do want to, I guess just for the clarity of the motion, the impact of a no vote is essentially the same as a motion to table, in that the impact of a no vote would be that the status is not changed, but the status would remain as interim director.
I'm sorry to interrupt real quick, but just as a point of clarification here, Jim made a motion to reopen. Scott seconded that motion. We had discussion on that motion. Isn't there still the motion to reopen that we need to vote on? And once that would pass, then we vote? Or does this automatically revert back? I just want clarification.
Sure. It was not a motion to reopen. It was a new motion to take essentially the same action. You're welcome.
And I'm not quite ready to vote because, I'm sorry, but I'm flabbergasted by what's gone on. Jim mentioned that this is disrespectful, et cetera, and that people don't want to come work here. We just had 70-some people apply for an administrative position. We just had scores that are in the top 5 to 10 in all of Montgomery County. I did not come here to be disingenuous. In fact, I made it very clear that I am supportive of Troy, but not of this process. So I'm not sure how that's disingenuous at all. So I needed to make that clear.
All those in favor?
We can public comment.
The item has been presented. It was on the agenda. It's the board's discretion.
We already gave public comment.
Correct.
Motion here.
The item has clearly been on the agenda.
We already
It's
had
the
the public-
exact word for word, same motion.
It was a 5-4 vote to table.
Yeah, what I don't understand is, I mean, I don't want to play ping pong here, but if I put a motion to table it again, what the heck are we doing here? I make a motion to table and find out what the hell happens.
I second it.
Vote on the motion to table. And then I would vote on the motion to table.
So we have the motion to table. Okay.
And it's been seconded.
Motion to table. All those in favor? It passes 5-4. All right, let's move forward with the agenda. Everybody's stated their views and opinions. We're through the personnel items, right? Yeah, that was in the first round with the adjustments to remove P1.
Next is 12 policy.
Yeah, so moving on to policy. Dr. Zerbe.
Should be noted, as per the report by the policy chair, that number 5 under number 12A5, policy 202, will be pulled and not be presented in December for second reading. Before you this evening, there are 10 policies as listed on the agenda for second reading and your approval this evening.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the second readings of policies as presented? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to other things, Dr. Zerbe.
There's a list of gifts and donations as listed from Lower Providence Optimist Club, $150 for the backpack program at Woodland Elementary School, and a trip to approve the Methacton High School girls track and field team to Ocean Breeze Athletic Complex in New York, no cost to the district.
Thank you. May I have a motion to accept the gift and approve the trip as presented? Second. Any discussion? Yeah.
Sorry, just real quick, another question for Kyle. As a member of one of these organizations, must I abstain my vote, or am I allowed to vote?
The question for you really would be a question of whether you believe voting on the item would violate the Pennsylvania Ethics Act, which requires an individual determination of you to make a determination as to whether you would receive a private pecuniary benefit from voting on the item. If you believe that that is the case, you could abstain and explain your reasoning for doing so, but that's your determination to make.
So having no benefit personally for this, I would be allowed to vote.
That's an individual determination, but if that's your conclusion, then you would.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Motion passes.
And Chris, just for clarification, I'm going to abstain, and I'm going to abstain just for purposes of, I am a member of this organization. I will have no benefit from this, but just so no member of the public decides that somehow I'm involved or I'll get money from this, it's safer to just abstain.
Okay, thank you. The one no vote or abstain vote is Mr. Ryan. All right, dates for the boards, November 28th, that's tonight. December 4th is reorganization board meeting at the high school. Any old business?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to say anything tonight, being this my last board meeting, but based on the actions that have just occurred, I have to say some things. First, I want to extend my apologies to Troy and Dr. Zerbe for the actions of what happened. I am embarrassed. Whether an individual board member wanted to vote on it or not, that's their call. It's their given right as being here. However, I guess call me old school, but when you have a person that is well qualified for the job being held up because of a job description, write-up, or approval, or whatever, I'm sorry, I just have a problem with that. When this board starts to micromanage the school district, which it just did, corrections need to be made. In my 2 years, the last 2 years I've been sitting on this board, I had severe questions of how it would go. I am pleased to say that most of those questions were answered. And there are some very good people that have come on this board. Everybody has brought distinctive parts to the board to function it. Up until now, I've seen things work very well. Not always would I agree with them all, but we got the work done. What we did not see, or what I've not seen in the past 2 years, and I had extensive conversations with Dr. Zerbe, is the need for board development. This board has not had any board development. The 2-year-old members have not had any board development as a full board. We have not had a retreat. We have not had anything. When I first got on the board, and Jim, you can attest to this, we had retreats, we had development sessions, we had things. PSBA came in and talked to us about different things, what to expect during negotiation sessions. I mean, everything. Invaluable. It taught you what it was like to really be a board member. I mean, yeah, you go through the class when you get elected, and the board members out there that are going to be sworn in next meeting at the reorg, you're going to go through that class. You'll find out what it really is to be a board member. And it's not you individually, it's you as a board. You need to remember that. Board development will only help bring this board together. After you go through reorg, you're going to have a lot of different decisions to make as far as committee positions, chairs, and all that. Board development will help you after everybody's seated in those positions. I really wish this meeting would have gone smoother tonight, and we would have had a new HR director. It is perhaps one of the most key positions in this school district. I would say second to that to the business manager. You have negotiation sessions with the teachers union. All bargaining units. What am I kidding? But you need a strong HR person, somebody who knows the people in the district. Troy knows those people. He's well qualified to do that job, and I know he would excel in that position. You have to give the man a chance to do it. Board did not do that tonight. I've enjoyed my time on the board here for the past 8 years. I think I've learned a lot. I've grown. As an individual, I've learned a lot about the education system and how it works. I'm still learning. And I want to thank Dr. Zerby for your time. I want to thank the administration, and I want to thank my fellow board members for making my last year very enjoyable. And I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
So, unlike Mr. Roth, who can speak off the cuff, I made some notes of what I wanted to say. So, I've greatly valued my experience as a member of the school board at Methacton. I have learned that changes in a school district require much thought, effort, and planning. Nonetheless, I encourage the board that will be in place beginning December 4th to consider the following issues. First, local taxes in Methacton School District are at a very high level. This creates burdens on taxpayers, homeowners, and businesses. With our recently improved budgeting, consideration of taxing levels can be discussed earlier in the budget process. I urge you to weigh the interests of all stakeholders in future budgets. Next, full-day kindergarten is in the best interest of all, students, teachers, the community as a whole. We have the opportunity to reduce the number of historically underperforming students, and Methacton is one of the few districts in this county that does not offer full-day kindergarten. I encourage you to change that. Next, issues need to be addressed in a more timely manner. Some examples are class rank policy, which can have a negative effect on many of our graduates. Discussion of the use of the Audubon School property, which has been closed now for over 5 months. And we still haven't established goals for the current school year. And it's not likely that it's going to happen probably until, well, maybe December 4th. As the community leaders of education in the Methacton area, members of this board should represent the highest levels of citizenship with behavior to be emulated. Respect for oneself, each other, and the public should be part of the board's mantra. And my last issue is transparency. Continue to discuss issues publicly. Keep information sources flowing. I would call to your attention 2 examples of departure from the information flow. First, the Windy Hill newspaper is no longer posted to the district website, and the data portfolio was not published this year. These are extremely valuable sources of information for the community and the opportunity for the community to know the district better. I've been honored to sit at this table. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Anybody else?
I was planning on thanking Herb and Brenda before they spoke, and I did write them personal notes. I did want to thank both of you, and I know you've given a lot of time and effort and energy to this district, and I know it might be selfish of me to ask as a parent and a board member and a taxpayer, but I hope that both of you will continue to give your insight because it's valuable. And I've enjoyed working with both of you on different committees. Thank you.
Anything else? Any new business?
Yes, item of new business to approve a student settlement agreement for student number 530850283.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve that? Second. Any more discussion on that? All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. Any other new business? Okay, let's move on to Kurt. Yeah, Jim.
New business. I look forward to the end of my 8th year, but I'll be back around. I'll be at the meetings. I'll be enjoying my 3 minutes at a time. My comments on prior to the vote taking. I'm going to enjoy that part. It's going to be fun. We'll get to know each other quite a bit. Thinking about this HR job, you might sit here and think it's beating a horse, but I'd rather resolve something and walk away with the table with something accomplished as a board. You know, some of it's job description we're worried about, other responsibilities. So once that's all figured out from the board, is it something that Troy's going to want to do? And does he look for another job? Or is it going to be something that's discussed with him and negotiate what that job description is going to look like, so you retain him in that position and make superintendent have a good administration, it gives Troy a position, and if he's an asset to the district, why would we want to lose him? With that being said, another way of looking at making a motion to fill that seat is to approve Troy for that position with a 90-day window of coming up with all the terminology, job description, and that's work between Troy and the administration and the board to come to some common ground. At the end of the 90 days, if he can't agree to it or the board can't agree to his terms, then the board sticks with what their terms in their description are, and they go through the interview process. But I think it's only fair to Troy and to Dr. Zerbe, who has to put his cabinet together, to try to navigate through that way. Because, yeah, if it's unilateral that the board just puts this description together, doesn't mean he wants to take the job based on that description. So where are you at once you finish that description? So if I was to make another motion, it'd be to hire Troy with a 90-day window of coming up and completing a job description that he can agree to, the board can agree to, and it gets two parts done. One, we have a successor to Bob Harney. Two, we have our job description and everybody's happy, and you know, Troy might not be necessarily happy with that and the board might not be happy, but if both parties are not so happy, it might be a good deal. So I don't know if you can...
I just wanted to make one legal comment. I do have some significant concerns about the idea of a provisional employee or a provisional period for a professional employee. And by professional employee, I'm referring to a specific classification of employees within the public school code. There is, I think, significant legal concern about whether the board has the authority to limit the duration of a professional employee for a period along those lines, and whether doing so could create an argument on the part of said employee that once hired to a specific position, there are certain rights that they would be entitled to prior to being removed from that position, and there may be certain grounds that would need to be met in order for that to happen.
Okay, and with that being... point taken, and with that being said, then taking that into consideration, a motion that if the board's going to go forward and work on a job description and to firm up what his role is, fine, we go along with that, but I would like him included in the process that they're working in tandem to figure this out, because it's not fair to Troy to come away 90 days later, 30 days later, whatever time frame may be, where the board comes up with a job description and he's like, no way. And vice versa. I mean, it works both ways, but I'd rather see certainty in that both parties are working together, and that's if the board feels that they feel that Troy's an asset to the district. And looking at, him progressing through the district, maybe assistant superintendent down the road. I mean, thinking of that, as Mr. Dorn pointed out, So, Chris, if there's a way, you're moving beyond this meeting. So being on what I said, if there's anything that you think that the board, a motion that you'd like to see the board and give them direction in how to proceed with this, that at the end of the day tonight, everybody walks at, what, we had our lively discussion, but yet we came to some common ground in hiring a good guy or creating good board process.
Jim, I appreciate your comments and thoughts, but I just want to end this meeting and move on. Okay, thanks, appreciate it. Any other comment? All right, open it up to courtesy of the floor.
Amy Breyer, MEA co-president. I don't usually get up to speak at board meetings, but I felt compelled to say something tonight after watching the video of last week's board meeting when the test scores of the district were discussed. I watched Dr. Katona's presentation, and as I watched it, I thought, these scores, I'm pretty happy with these scores. They look pretty good. But the screens were going by kind of quickly, so I wasn't able to absorb all the information. So I was kind of surprised when at the end of the meeting, when a community member stood up and said that these scores were terrible, repeatedly terrible. The board should be concerned about how terrible these scores are. So I thought I must have missed something in the presentation, so I asked to get a copy of it today, of Dr. Katona's presentation. And it doesn't support my idea of terrible. When you look at the data in our county is a high-performing county, and in every one of these tests, our county performs 10 to 20% higher than the state average. And in 16 out of 17 of the state tests that were administered last year, methactin performed above the county average. I think that's impressive. I don't think that's terrible at all. And I think it bears reminding everybody, because it's not a secret, we all agreed on this fact, that our faculty, our teaching staff, is paid significantly below the average for the county. And yet we're producing results that are above the county. So I would say that the results are not terrible, and on the contrary, I think we're providing a high-quality education at right now what is a bargain price.
Thank you.
Diana Kernop, co-MEA president. There are three things that I would like to say. The first thing is I would like to thank publicly Brenda Hackett, Scott Dorn, Herb Roth, and Jim Phillips for their service on the board. I certainly know that being involved in the association, we don't always see eye to eye, but we certainly have spent time talking and taking care of things that need to be taken care of. I certainly have appreciated Herb and Brenda being on the negotiating team and the perspectives that they've brought to the table. And I want to thank them publicly for their time, and I want to thank all four of you for your time and service to the board. Second thing I would like to address is, I heard that you say that we have 3 bargaining units that don't have contracts. Certainly we all know out there that MEA doesn't have a contract and that we are going to non-binding arbitration. The 2 dates in January have been set. And you mentioned the Teamsters and that you've met with the Teamsters. And then you mentioned MESPA and that MESPA is being held up to be tied to the MEA contract. And MEA and MESPA are separate organizations. MESPA certainly deserves a settlement if they can get a settlement aside from MEA. But lastly, the thing that you never mention, and that, although they're not a bargaining unit and you meet and discuss with them, is you've never mentioned that you still have a group out there called your administrators who don't have a contract, although they got a raise in July. And I know that you meet and discuss with them, and I know that their contract will be contingent upon our contract as well. And I think in fairness to the 3 bargaining groups, it is only fair to add them to that group. The last thing I would like to talk about, and I really had stayed away from this topic because in listening to all of you, it's a difficult topic. In fairness to Troy, this has nothing to do with you personally, and it has nothing to do with you, Dr. Zerbe, personally either. I think that you have a great regard for Troy. I think that you would see that Troy would be mentored and that Troy would probably grow into a very positive HR director. That's not the issue here. I've worked in Methacton for over 41 years, and I've served on a lot of committees in my day, and I've watched a lot of things that happen in the district, and one of the things is that you as a board have a policy and procedure in place. And that policy and procedure for many years that I worked here was that when you had administrative positions from a principal all the way up to a superintendent, you posted the positions and you looked at internal candidates because you wanted to hire and grow from within, but you also looked at external candidates if they qualified for what you wanted. You do grow people from within. Jason Sorgini was a teacher before he was an assistant principal, before he left to go to Lower Moreland and be a high school principal and return here. You do hire from within. Jen Brucker was a teacher here. She was staff development coordinator, and she became a principal. She still had to go from being staff development coordinator to principal by the interview process. Susan Angstead was an elementary special ed supervisor. To get the position she's in, she still had to go through the process that you defined. I appreciate very much wanting and needing to have a cabinet that you can work with. I think that that's probably critical. You hire a superintendent for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. When you hire the other positions, you're not hiring for a defined length of time like you do the superintendent. Those people do not lose their jobs, nor should they, when the superintendent moves on. So, in part, it's wonderful to have the superintendent be able to pick who he wants, and certainly his voice should be heard loudly by you who sit on that interview panel. But there's also a continuum in the district, and that continuum is going to need to be met even if Dr. Zerbe's gone. And you want to have the best people in those positions to carry the district forward as you fill some of those other vacancies. I know that it's not an easy decision, and I know it's gotten personal about Troy now, and I think that that's sad. But you have had a procedure that you have followed in all of your hiring for a very long time. And I do believe that if Troy is the stellar candidate and has had the job experience, that even if you posted the job, he's heads up because he knows Methacton. I'm sad that this had to happen to you. But I again say, you can move forward and you do have a process. Thank you.
Anyone else? Joe.
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. I just want to thank the cosmic forces out there that kept Dennis McCall safe for 5 years. Because if something would have happened to Dennis McCall, Plan Con J would never get filed. So I just want to thank everything that kept him safe in the universe. Board secretary position. Hopefully the board secretary is required to come to the board meeting and render their assistance here at the board meeting. I would like to see that happen. This no job description for HR, I mean, I don't understand that. I really don't. I mean, if you knew you didn't have a job description for HR, why wasn't it worked on and passed around the board and, you know, discussed and brought to the board for approval? PASBO website has a data bank of HR job descriptions. Doesn't one exist here? Did one exist for Mr. Harney? I don't know. I mean, the person that's in charge of job description doesn't have a job description for his job. I mean, and if you knew that, get it done. Take an afternoon and get that done. I don't understand why that didn't happen, why that's a problem. The fact there's no data portfolio Brenda Hackett brought up, I don't know why that is. I mean, that should be something that should be on the website. I don't know why that is. Why there isn't any board development strategies in place to take advantage of PSBA, I don't know why that doesn't happen. I mean, that should just be a normal thing for new board members that are coming on. Plan Con J, no matter what happened on Plan Con J, it still should have been posted as an attachment to the agenda. I don't know why that was kept off as an attachment. I just don't know why. I mean, turnover, it has nothing to do with why it didn't get posted as an agenda attachment so that we can look at it. And the last thing I have is just a question I didn't get an answer for. Have we admitted any students to kindergarten prior to age 5? This year, last year, do we do that? Can I get an answer for that? See, this silence here, I thought I voted not to have this silence. I don't know who's muzzling you. I don't know if it's some sort of recommendation from council. I don't know if it's a recommendation from council based on what Dr. Zerbe wants. But this quiet, just a simple question, have we admitted any students to kindergarten prior to the age of 5 by September 1st, I think?
I can tell you I don't know the answer to that.
Yes, but somebody here should. But the quiet is not what I voted for. Have we?
I don't know the answer to that either. I would imagine if Dr. Katona was here or Dr. Engstedt, as a parent, I know that there are processes in place. I believe if your child tests a certain way, then there is a process in place. But I don't know when the last time that happened. I can tell you my children did not qualify and did not get tested for that.
I mean, has somebody...
That's all I can say.
I just want to know if any students were admitted before the age of 5.
As part of the opportunity to get those responses, you can submit your question to Ms. Lynch, and we will respond in an email with the information that you need.
Why can't I get it now? I mean,
because you're asking. Well, you're asking me for a question basic on in the last year or whenever.
Have we?
And that would take some research. We would need to talk to our student enrollment process and look at that information.
So you don't know?
Well, of course I don't know that question.
All right. Thank you. And Troy, one thing about Troy. Troy knows how my wife and I feel about Troy. Okay? My wife has talked to you in the past. I've supported you in the past. It's just, I can't believe the job didn't get posted. It should get posted right away, and then you're acting, and people from internally, they're interviewed, people externally. But that's the way it should happen. Then the recommendation would come for you to get the job. I mean, that should have happened. That's all.
Thank you. Any other? Good.
Jim Malik, Worcester. Chris, I'm going to call you Chris because I can't call you Mr. Boardman tonight because I definitely feel your pain. I know exactly what you're thinking. I know exactly what you're feeling. I can't believe you trusted him because knowing what you're dealing with up there, it was a classic power play, Chris. People are up there going, oh, I listen to everything. I make my decision based on the facts. No, that's not what happened tonight. It's a classic power play. I watched like a bunch of little kids in a schoolyard up there behaving like kids. And then what I saw was Mr. Ryan, who should resign, because you board members were having a discussion and he wanted to shut you all up. Now that is a problem. I got a problem with that. I got a problem with Mr. Ryan's behavior. I take that down, Mr. Ryan. I got a problem with you shutting me up at the last meeting, selectively enforcing the 3-minute rule. I guess my question to you is, do you have a problem with free speech? You seem to have a problem with my free speech.
Jim, I try to manage the time, and when we only have a couple of people, I do let it go over the 3-minute.
Let me finish. Let me finish. My free speech, selectively enforcing the 3-minute rule, are his words. Your free speech, making a motion to cut off discussion of the board members, that's a problem in my book. So let me ask a couple questions of Mr. Ryan. Are you prepared tonight to give us any explanation of how you got a citation for public drunkenness? Or are you going to avoid that question tonight again?
I'll do it again. I have no further comment on this.
Okay. Then how about this question? Were you drinking on the night of 9/30/17? Help us out.
Those are getting into personal questions.
No, they're not personal questions.
In my opinion, they are.
No, they're not. How about this one? Did you make the officer aware that you were a school board member on the night of 9/30/17? Any answer to that one? How about this one? Do you know when your trial is coming up? Do you know when that is? How about this one, Chris? Did Mr. Ryan tell you guys about his situation? Do you guys know about it? Because I know Miss Reese does, because when I brought it up on the 24th, she's sitting here nodding her head going, oh, yeah. So I know she knows about it. Do you guys
I was
know
nodding
about
my
it?
head at your comment of Judge Rebar. That's what I was nodding my head
I'm
at.
talking to you. Were you aware of it?
I'm aware of it, yes.
Did he make you aware of it? Do you know the facts?
I'm not going to have a discussion on it, Jim.
Okay. Then Ms. Larsenese, on the night of the 24th, came up to me in my seat and told me I was disgusting for bringing it up. And you somehow thought it occurred outside the room. Did you somehow know about the discussion? No? Well, I'm here to ask for my apology. Do I get my apology, Ms. Larsenese, for you calling me disgusting?
Can you please finish up?
Well, you gave the other person 5 minutes, so I'd like the same treatment.
That we're right about there. That's
Well,
right.
not really. I got 350 here. Do I get my apology? From this, what I consider to be dysfunctional board. That's what I'm calling you guys tonight. I think Herbie was being nice to you folks, but sitting in the back, maybe you all need to review the videotape, because what I saw was not very impressive. How about an apology for calling a taxpayer disgusting? Because you seem to be Miss High and Mighty up there. Why don't you...
Jim, can you please finish up now?
Sure.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. I know you... Well, I know. I know you appreciate it. I'm waiting for my apology. No apology? First time with nothing to say?
Anybody else? Candy.
Candy Oliver, Eggleville. There was a lot of discussion tonight about Dr. Sinovic, I can never say your last name, call her Troy, his position in the school district, but you also voted to change the status of a secretary at Eagleville Elementary to Dr. Zerbe's secretary. I think that's a pretty good jump. And the fact that the job description was an attachment the night you're going to vote. Now, I know Mary from when my children were there, but I'm sure she's getting added duties working for Dr. Zerbe. She's also going to take the position until it's changed as board secretary, and her salary's listed. There's no discussion on that. One thing you left out is Troy's salary's not going to change. Maybe if he was getting a pay raise, you might have given it to him. But I think the fact, sitting in this room, and I've seen a lot of people hired, and I've seen people brought in the administration building that didn't go through that process, that jobs were created for them, and they went from a school into the administration building. Now, there wasn't this much discussion when Dr. Klaus was hired, or Mr. Klaus. And don't take this personally. There was no discussion when Mr. Bricker was hired. But for some reason, you're singling out Troy. From where I sit, it looks personal. It may not be. I haven't heard anyone complain about the job he's been doing. He woke up one day and became interim head of HR because Dr. Harney left. He got his degree and he left. And I think Troy has more than a bachelor's, since it's doctor. I don't know, over the years, HR qualifications change, but you put a gentleman in that office that knows this district. You also dump transportation in his lap. Is he the quasi-transportation manager? Because you handed transportation to Dr. Harney. It's an HR. Transportation's a whole separate issue, which no one is working on. We still have the same problems, and I think he's done a commendable job. The fact is, no one on this board since June has questioned his job and what he's been doing. And to sit there today in front of him and discuss this, I mean, I'm embarrassed for him. But I don't know how no one said whether he's qualified or not. I mean, he's not working in a building that's 18 stories high and had thousands of people. He's in a small office building, and he works hand in hand with everyone else in that building and has for years. And I'm sure the people in those different little departments know what each department is doing. He's done a fantastic job as IT. IT does factor into HR. But to sit here and just quibble about, in all the years I've been in this room, I've never seen this. But I also have seen people get jobs in the administration building that no qualifications were ever listed, and they just walked in. But it's embarrassing. I mean, you have a secretary, and I have no qualms about, she is more than qualified for the job, but no discussion, and there was an attachment with job description. Why wasn't that discussed tonight? It wasn't. You're focused on Troy. And the jobs, and I take Mr. Boardman at his word, he stated since June, he's been pretty busy dealing with the teachers' negotiations, and we had a strike, and there's other things going on in the school district, and maybe someone else on the board could have brought it up. But no one seemed to worry about filling that position because we already had someone there sitting there, which I believe is doing a good job. So I think you would want to keep employees that are valued. Because at this point, and I can honestly say if I was in Troy's position, I would be looking for another job. Because it doesn't seem that you value the work that he's done, that he is doing. And from what I've seen since he's been sitting there, he's had maybe 99% of the time, was able to answer every question that was given to him while he sat at the table. He's come prepared to these meetings. And I mean prepared. And I haven't seen that much. But to push this off, it's been going on for 7 months. the board should have jumped on this in June or July, and you didn't do it. So this is on you now. And I'd like to take the opportunity, since I've been in this room a long time, I would like to thank Herb, and of course Jim Phillips, who I've been in this room with for a long time, Scott and Brenda. I think you've done a fantastic job. I would like to know who's going to pick up Brenda's load. Brenda has done the heavy lifting on this board for the last 4 years. She has attended more meetings than I think the whole board put together for every level, home and school, committee meetings. I can't list them all because it's been 4 years. I just want to know who's going to pick up her slack. Because she's, in all the years I've been in this room, she is the hardest working school director I've ever seen. And I think she should get more than a pat on the back. And I also do think Mrs. Larceny does owe Dr. Malik and the public an apology.
Anybody else? John?
John Andrews, Lower Providence. We're going to have 4 new members on the board a week from today. And apparently a short business meeting a week from today. And I think that if I'm to believe Candy Alibar, who's checked on other districts, they treat December as a regular working month and have several meetings in the month of December. And I think that the 9 members next week ought to decide whether there's any reason to have December as a vacation month or to have a meeting. Maybe you discuss some of the things that Ms. Hackett spoke of this evening. With regard to Dr. Sosnovic, we've said a lot this evening, and one possibility is that we do a thorough hiring process for the HR and legal relations position, and at some point in time, maybe Dr. Sosnovic is deserving of the board's consideration as an assistant superintendent, because he's done well in a variety of positions, and I think he has a superintendent certificate, and that may recognize his skills and value to the district, and strengthen the administration. So that's an alternative thought that I think is worthy of discussion.
Thank you. Anybody else? Motion to adjourn the meeting? Second. All those in favor?